10 minutes, we'll get back into the music videos. I really enjoyed watching you in those. I mean, the Kasha one, I did have to kind of look away for a second,
Oh, I know, yeah, the capture one
but it
threw me
was
off a lot.
fun. Yeah.
Funny because when I first saw it, because I didn't know if it wasn't going to end up in the video. A lot of times you shoot a video, it doesn't end up in there. You know what I mean? Sometimes it was funny because they ended on the forward thrusting crotch shot.
Uh,
I was like, oh, great. Let's end on that, but okay, that's good.
that.
They shot it from all different angles.
Welcome, my dear friends. It's great to see you. I'm Stephen Clements, a writer, a gamer, and an appreciator of big brain activities in general. On this channel, I perform dramatic story readings, I provide role-playing game and movie reviews, and I get to talk to interesting people. And in this episode, we're going to talk to an interesting person who writes RPGs, one of which I've reviewed. I'm talking about Mark Taormino, head honcho at Dark Wizard Games, and you may remember that we talked to him previously in my review of his debut module, Hanging Coffins of the Vampire Queen. And you know, I enjoyed talking to Mark so much, and the more I looked into him, the more interesting a guy he became, that I just had to do a full interview with the guy, and he was gracious enough to agree. And as you can see from the runtime, we had a lot to talk about. And I mean, come on, the guy hits two of the strongest points that I'm interested in. Most of my interviews have been with people from the role-playing game industry or from the film industry, and Mark, he does both. He makes RPGs and he acts in films, music videos, short films, commercials, all that kind of stuff. So I hope you agree that this will be time well spent. I'll catch you on the flip side. My dear friends, welcome to the show, Mark Taormino, who's also a dear friend, because we've spent a little time with Mark on the channel before in my Hanging Coffins of the Vampire Queen interview segment. I had so much fun talking to Mark. I found out that he's into all kinds of things I'm really interested in. He's an actor, a director, a producer, a game designer, a software coder, and I wanted to hear more about all that stuff, and I thought if I wanted to hear about it, well, the rest of my dear friends might want to as well. So before we get into the questions, Mark, welcome back. It's good to have you.
Films, music, thank you again for having me back. Thank you. I'd love to be on the show.
You know, I really like to get to know the different parts of folks that I've already heard about, say whether it's a short film director at a film festival that I went to, or an RPG game designer that I met at a con, or I've read their books or talked to previously, and to find out what else there is to them, what else they're into, because people will surprise you. There's all kinds of interesting things that you can learn from folks. So most of this interview isn't actually going to be about the games that you've made. I mean, a big chunk of it will be, but look at that resume that I just quickly rattled off. There's all these life experiences buried in there that I'd like to know what that was like, to see what you learned from it, that maybe we can learn from it. Because getting back to the role-playing game issue, one of the things I like most about role-playing games is getting to see what it's like to be a person different than myself. So, and trying to portray them accurately. So the amateur acting angle of role-playing games, I'm really into. Who better to talk to than a guy who does professional acting and writes role-playing games about that stuff? So you've got at least 76 listed acting credits on your IMDb. How'd you get into acting?
Okay, thanks for that. Great question. Basically, I got into the acting and the movie business starting around 1984. I was 14 years old, and my parents had got divorced back in the 70s, and my mom had moved to LA. And in 84, we moved into an apartment complex in Burbank, California, which turned out to be kind of the mecca of the movie industry. Warner Brothers was there, Disney's there, Universal's right around the corner there. And in that complex was a lot of people that were actors, it turned out. See, that complex was actually used in a lot of filming from all the way back to the 60s and 70s. The apartment building itself was a very unique looking tropical building. So BJ and the Bear was filmed there, and all kinds of movies. In fact, there was a movie that was filmed there in 1984 when I was 14. I watched them film this movie. It was called, you may not recognize the name because it's been a long forgotten movie for whatever reason. It's called The Wildlife. It was the unofficial sequel to Fast Times at Ridgemont High and starred Leah Thompson, Eric Stoltz, Sean Penn's brother, Christopher Penn was one of the stars of that movie, and several other people were in it. They filmed that movie there as well for like a couple weeks. So it was kind of surrounded by this situation all the time of like actors and things like that growing up there. So later on, towards when I got to be around 17, 18, around 87, 88, I started getting more into thinking, trying to become an actor at that point. Prior to that, I was still always playing D&D when I was 14, 13. I was more into writing computer games and programming stuff back then as well, my Commodore 64. And so the movie thing was just sort of a fun byproduct of the life situation I was in, surrounded by all these people. In fact, some of the people that lived there that were notable character actors from that time period, from the 70s and 80s, you may not recognize their names off the top of your head, but when I tell you their parts, you'll recognize them. So it was Julius Harris. He played in Live and Let Die, the guy with the hook hand that gets Bond on the crocodiles. He lived there. Julius was also in King Kong 77. He was in that. He was in all kinds of movies prior to that. In addition to that, so you're not going to recognize his name, but Clifton James was there. He's the guy that also played in Live and Let Die. He was the country sheriff. That was the guy that James Bond meets. He played the country sheriff in Superman 2 when Zod and them come to that rural town, and he's the get this boy out of here, that character guy. So all these people kind of lived there, and I grew up around them. So it was just sort of a little extra thing. And then around the late 80s, around 80, 89, I started getting interested in another young kid moved in that was my age, and in that time period also. And his mom was in Batman. I think it was 2 episodes of Batman's the 70s show. She played the woman, Baby Jane Townsend or whatever, the blonde woman in like the episodes of Batman. So his mom, that's basically how I got connected into the thing, was because they moved in there, and my friend Ben was her son. He was my age. He said, hey, let me take this acting class with this guy named Virgil Fry. He became my acting teacher at the time. And he had an acting class in his house. And Virgil was an old, like 60s, 70s, 80s actor, early 90s actor. He looked like a Charles Bronson type guy. And once again, you may not recognize his name, but his daughter was Soleil Moonfry, the girl that played Punky Brewster on the hit show in the 80s. I started going to his class 3 times a week. They had classes on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and I would go attend his classes. Another one of his students back then, but this guy was working all the time, was Malachi from Children of the Corn, the redhead guy. You may not recognize off the top, but if you're familiar with Back to the Future. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Very end, when George was trying to dance with Lorraine at the very end before he can kiss her, and this asshole shows up and says, "Scram, McFly, I'm cutting in." That's Courtney. That guy was in my acting class at the time. Plus, he was in Colors, and so was Virgil was in Colors with Sean. So I was kind of surrounded by all these people and stuff. So that's how I got in, just by virtue of living in a complex where there was a lot of actors, and as a byproduct, I suddenly got kind of swept up into that mindset that let's be in the movies or whatever, that kind of thing.
That's really cool. What was the name of the apartment complex?
Oh, at the time, it was called the Equestrian Apartments. Nowadays, it's called the 1200. They changed the name of it. But back then, in the 80s, it was kind of like a rundown looking in the 80s, it still looked like from the 70s. Paint was peeling. It was kind of a rundown place, really, at the time. Then in the early 90s, they renovated it and made it look much nicer. So it's funny because now on YouTube, you can find guys doing filming locations of the Wildlife movie, and they'll show clips from the Wildlife movie back in 84 of what the apartment complex looked like. And then they went in there in modern day and filmed the modern day version of that apartment complex where I grew up. And it looks totally different, of course, from the 80s version. It looked like really shitty because back in the 80s, we didn't think of it that way. We didn't think this is a shitty building. It was just reality for us at the time. But when you look back on it now, you know what I mean? You're kind of like, that looked like a shitty apartment complex.
That's the thing about growing up in rough environments or growing up poor. You don't know that that's substandard. You don't know any of that's wrong. That's just what you've grown up in.
Right, exactly. So it's just so funny to kind of see that video. When I see that video, I'm like, wow, that was so much different then. You know what I mean? And in the movie, though, if you've ever seen the Wildlife, they also changed the sign. It didn't say Equestrian Apartments. It says Club Horizon or some kind of weird other name. But anyways, so that's how I got started with all that. In fact, I watched them filming those scenes with Christopher Penn when he was by the swimming pool. They had a lot of scenes. It was like a sort of party. It's supposed to be like a party apartment complex, which in reality, it was back then, especially back then. We would, every weekend, we would barbecue and have beers and go wild, whatever, especially back in the 80s. Especially, it was even worse, they said, in the 70s before I was there. But in the 80s, it was bad enough, known as a wild place, like a party place. Now it's like cricket. No, there's nothing going on over there nowadays at modern times, whether it's all nice and modern, but there's nothing like that going on anymore.
So did those parties introduce a teenage Mark to cocaine for the first time, or did you keep it clean?
No, not for me. Not there for that.
Good.
Because I was too young, but mostly it was a lot of beer drinking for those folks. Budweiser was all the time drinking beer, barbecuing, and they probably did a lot of marijuana, I'm sure, at the time too. But I was still too young to partake in that at the time. But otherwise, yeah, it was known as like a wild party place. But yes, that I'm sure that stuff did go on, but I just wasn't privy to it at the
See,
time.
you can have wild, decadent parties and protect the kids at the same time. You can keep it. It's okay.
Yes.
We can do that. You know, these days, a lot of folks, they don't roll like that. And no, leave the kids alone. And so it's good that young Mark was safe. I'm glad to hear about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, you mentioned Virgil Fry as an acting instructor. Did he set up like an acting school? I mean, maybe not like with official buildings and stuff like Juilliard, but is that what you went to?
Yes, exactly. A great question there. Yes. Basically, he had set up his own kind of school in his house, which is basically he had a house in the Hollywood Hills. So he would have a classes on like Mondays would be like scene study and exercises. Mondays would be like scene studies where you sit there and practice out a scene to do with their partner and then perform it. Wednesdays would be like improvs and exercises. It was all done at night. Friday nights would be cold reading exercise, cold reading classes. They give you a script like you're going to want to like an audition. Basically, you get a script, 3 pages. You're this character, you're that character, and then you have some time to read over it. And then you have to go up in front of the class and do the scene like an audition. And then Virgil would sit there and hold court with it, telling you what was good and what was bad and things like that. So basically, yes. So it wasn't an official thing like where there was a big buildings and stuff like Juilliard, but that was kind of commonplace back then, where a lot of times older actors would hold their own like classes. Sometimes, in fact, when you read Tarantino's biography, you know who his acting teacher was back then when he was first coming up in the 80s, trying to be an actor. Roscoe P. Coltrane from Dukes of Hazzard.
Roscoe Coltrane.
Yeah. James Best was his acting teacher, the guy that played Roscoe P. Coltrane. Similar
Nice.
situation where they have their own kind of class and teach people in their house, stuff like that. So, and nowadays, I'm glad that, thank God, that I was able to go through that back then, that kind of an environment, because nowadays, that stuff generally I don't think would fly too much nowadays, going to somebody's house with a bunch of people and stuff, especially some of the things that we have to do, like exercises and different things that would push the boundaries. For example, like I said, there was the dead body exercise where you would have to, which I put in my Legend of the Seven Golden Demons module, to get you to be emotional. So they had an improv where you would set up the couch like with pillows and put a blanket over it. And then one at a time, you'd have to go up to it and talk to it like it was a dead relative or some person that had passed on. And you had to reflect on that and perform to a performance, an improv about that in front of the whole class and get emotional and things like that. Because, like you said, gamers like to do role playing and acting. I thought that would be an interesting concept to put into my Legends of the Seven Golden Demons module, where I did that. Only in the module, you're not reflecting on somebody else, you're reflecting on yourself. So when you see that body there in the module, it's you. And then you have to reflect on what things you regretted in life that you didn't do or that you didn't say to somebody, things like that. So anyways, that's a fairly normal exercise. But there was one exercise back then that I was terrified of and I would never do it because back then I was like 18. You know, in 1988, I was 18, starting that class around that time. It was called the shower exercise. Would not fly in modern day times, but back then it was normal. You'd go up in front of the whole class, as long as you were okay with it, and strip down to your underwear, okay? And pretend that you were taking a shower and singing or talking or doing whatever. The whole point was to not be self-conscious, you know what I mean, in front of the audience and be able to do a performance like that and not be suddenly freak out or break down or something like that.
I agree with you in the modern sensibilities. This wouldn't fly going on in somebody's home because, well, one, that person, particularly if they're an experienced actor, they have to worry about the students stealing their stuff.
It happened also back then, yes.
Okay, it was. And also because of the Me Too thing that pretty much only caught the known suspects like Harvey Weinstein for being sex pests. But I'm a fan of the mentality of train as you fight. And so if you're going into a film industry, you may have to do a role like that. You want to be experienced and know how you perform in these different circumstances. So I don't think it's inappropriate, but those people, I'm confident, think it's inappropriate.
Correct. And back then, if you didn't want to do the thing, you didn't have to do it at all. You know what I mean? Nobody said anything. Nobody said, do this. It was just whatever you were comfortable doing in that, or you could go down to whatever you were comfortable with. But to your point, where like for me at the time, I was like, oh, it's okay. I will step out of that one because I was just too young and scared and you know what I mean, of doing something like that. Bad enough doing things for me like the dead body exercise or other things. Especially back then, acting classes were almost like, was all about getting in tune with each person's sensibilities and fears and things that they were concerned about their personal life, insecurities, to help build your confidence, you know what I mean? Things like that. So it was almost like a therapy session or something sometimes. You'd work through these things, but with all the people suddenly around you. So, but with that particular exercise though, so yeah, but I didn't do it, but other people did. Didn't have a problem with it, men and women. And once again, nobody even thought ill of it. He explained what it was all about, what the whole thing was. They just did it. But where it comes into play was fast forward to real quick. So I avoided it like the plague, back then. But fast forward to March of 2019, where I get cast in a Kesha video dancing in Speedos, almost naked. In fact, first she wanted me naked in there, was going to be blurred out. So when I first accepted the job, I was under the assumption it's going to be naked. So that just goes to show you how much in my mind I had grown from 18-year-old Mark being paranoid of being in my underwear or something, like in Weird Science, where 2019 Mark was like, sure, Kesha, we'll do a naked thing, would be danced around by fat
well,
stomach.
you grew more comfortable in your own skin. Like one time I met B-movie starlet Lynn Lowry in person, and a lot of her roles involved her being buck naked. So I asked her, what is it like being on camera and acting with not a stitch of clothes on? And fortunately, she's a very lovely woman even to this day, so it's okay to see her naked. And she said, well, you just have to think of it as your costume. That's your costume for this scene. And once you think of it like that, then it becomes more normal for you to handle it and you can work with it more freely. And I was like, oh, okay. So at Virgil's school, did he subscribe to a particular school of thought of acting? Was he a method guy? Was he something else?
What he taught specifically was more of the method system, which is what I grew up with training from him. The method system is where you say that in a movie scene you're dealing with an emotional thing where you're arguing or fighting or you're supposed to cry about something. In the method system, you try to draw internally from some real life situation that happened to you in real life. Get yourself to an emotional point. So if you're going to have to cry, you think of, when somebody, your relative passed away or your animal passed away or something, to get you to the point of being emotional to match the scene that you're supposed to be in, versus the Meisner method, which is more of like the Ian McKellen thing where you're just kind of, I act, boy, or something, like I pretend like I'm acting, you know what I mean, or whatever, where you just kind of get to the moment and just thinking about it without drawing from an internal thing. So to answer your question, yes, Virgil's method was teaching the method system, which he had learned for several years. He had started like the 60s and 70s. He was in all kinds of films and stuff like that all throughout that time. He looked like a Charles Bronson type guy. And he was also in Colors with Sean Penn in the 90s and several other movies, Last American Virgin. He was in something to do with Easy Rider and all kinds of stuff. But basically, he said that they used to tell him when he'd go into an audition, he'd walk in the door and the casting people would literally sit back and go, "You're uglier than Charles Bronson." And then he would sit there and go, "Hey." So he would say things, but can you imagine that nowadays? Also speaking of time difference, walking into something, some casting person saying, "You're uglier than Charles Bronson."
That's tough, man, because Charles Bronson was not a good looking guy.
Right. It's funny. And you can see how that would, in a Me Too era or something, people would be so offended, by something like that. But that was just commonplace, he said, back then.
Well, yeah,
and just more visual, you know what I mean? What your look was and everything like that. So,
well, in a visual media, it's important. Details matter. What you look like is important. Apparently, folks keep casting you because I guess they're going for this Ron Jeremy without the baggage 70s look. But that's what you have to offer. That's what they want. That's why they keep grabbing you.
Yes, and speaking of that, right now I have that Ron Jeremy look with the crazy sideburns and the hair and the mustache. But when I first got back in 2011, I had 3 different stints of acting. The first one was 1988 through 94, and then I got out because I was like, I got to get a real job, it's working. And I became a software engineer for my whole career. Then in 2001 through 2003, I said, let me try to get back in again. I tried, it didn't work out again, just small stuff, nothing big. Then I forgot all about it. I was like, okay, I'm done with the movie business. 2004, I'm just going to stay in software and just forget about it. Until 2011 happened, and I went to a party, and I ran into this lady suddenly that said, oh, I was talking about movie stuff. And she goes, oh, you used to be an actress? Yeah, but it didn't work out years ago. Said, I'm an agent. She said, I can help you get going nowadays. I was like, oh, get out of here. Like I just wasn't even there mentally. And she's like, no, let's try it. So, okay. So we got I got the pictures taken and signed up with her. And sure enough, suddenly within like a week, she suddenly says, okay, you got to go out to an audition for a Progressive commercial. What? So suddenly I realized she was completely legit, which I had suspected, you know what I mean? But I wasn't planning on it. So suddenly I found myself going out on auditions suddenly for a big project. And I was like, okay, let's try it again. And that's when I kind of had an epiphany where you can't put timetables on success of how well you're going to do. A lot of people do that, especially when they're brand new. They come out and say, well, the same thing I had done. Well, I'm going to try it for 2 or 3 years. If it doesn't work, I'll just get out of it and forget all about it, which is what most people do. But in reality, the way it works is you kind of just got to stay in it as long as you can. If you're happy getting small parts here and there or big parts, whatever, you just have to be happy just being able to be a working actor, whether you're being a small part or a one-line part or no lines, a bit part, or maybe a big part where you have a lot of dialogue in the movie. Either way, you just have to be happy, kind of staying involved, and just that's your level of happiness and contentment in the business, without saying, oh no, I need to be super famous or I need to be a big star of my own movies or something in the next 2-3 years, because it just doesn't work that way. You just have to have that kind of attitude and contentment that that's okay to work whenever you can, and that's just the way it's going to be. The way I found out the most successful, healthy attitude about it.
I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the questions I had was, what's it been like doing all these extra roles, these bit parts for decades and decades? And it sounds to me like you've learned, and your opinion might have evolved over the years of doing it. And at this point, you're just happy to be there. You love doing it, and you just like being involved in this field of passion that you have. Is that right?
Yes, correct. Exactly. It just sort of evolved over time because when you're younger, you start to put time frames on things because it only makes sense to do that. Like, okay, well, I got to have a real job or something. You can't make enough money in the movie business, even if you're just trying to do background work alone. That alone is, even if I tried, you know what I mean? Like, I used to have friends that would say that they couldn't even get arrested, whatever. They would be trying constantly to get parts, sending in for all kinds of jobs and not getting anything. In fact, I used to have a friend, an older guy at the time, back in 1988. I was 18 in 88, and this friend of mine at the time, he was 40 years old. And real quick with him, in his normal life, he used to be like a nuclear power engineer or something like that with the nuclear industry, like in the East Coast, in New Jersey, had a whole full career. And then one day at 40 years old, he suddenly said, you know what, I think I'm going to go to Hollywood and become an actor. And he gave up his career and he saved up like a few $100,000, moved to LA, moved to Burbank into the complex where I lived at 1988. That's where I met him when I was 18. He was 40. He started in trying to get parts, and he ended up getting a lot of student films and little low budget parts. He was doing better than me at the time because I couldn't get arrested when I was 18, really, except for little tiny like student films. But at least my friend Jerry, his name was Jerry. Jerry was getting he would get cast in like low budget B movies at the time, playing like the police captain would say, damn it, shotgun, you can't go running around shooting up the town. The DA's on my ass over this, blah, blah, blah. We got to go get that serial killer off the street. You know, that kind of part. So he would get those kind of parts. But even then, he would get frustrated too because it was few and far between. And eventually he would work for a few years and then suddenly he'd have to stop and go back to New Jersey and become a nuclear engineer again for like another 3 or 4 years, save up more money, come back out again. Similar to me, where you had like different stints, where you try to come back and do it again. But in his case, after a few times, he just kind of gave up and stopped doing it. And I tried to get him reactivated again when I talked to him back around 2011, but he thought he was too old at the time because he was significantly age gap between me and. So it just sort of happens. Sometimes you just can't get arrested. Even if I want to do an extra part, the last one I got it's been months, really. I mean, they send in to me a lot of times. They'll send me jobs every few days and say, hey, are you available for this job? And I'll say, yes. And it says, okay, thanks, but this is not a guarantee. We're just checking, okay. And they don't hear anything. You don't get it. So they're few and far between, even just for a little simple background job. It's hard to get. Once in a while, some people can work regularly, but you just have to have the luck of the draw. So sometimes you can suddenly get super lucky and hit it big. So for example, back in 88, 89, 1990, I was 20 years old and I went on an open casting call for some show or something for actors. They had like 400 guys standing in line outside the studio. Everyone, habba. And it just happened to be right in front of me. Habba was this young kid. His name was Chris. He looked like a young Tom Cruise. He was like early 20s, good looking kid, long hair, muscular, right? And we became friends. This is back in 1990. There's no cell phones. There's nothing, regular phone lines and pagers. And then neither one of us got that job. but he ended up getting cast in some sort of an NBC show, which nobody's ever heard of. It's called The Guys Next Door. And it went on for 2 years. It was a Saturday morning show. It was like 5 guys. They were supposed to be like a New Kids on the Block type of band. And then it was like a Saturday morning show where they would do skits and comedic things like that. So he suddenly got cast in that, and then suddenly got the money. He suddenly got the car. He got the Corvette. He moved into the apartment complex, the same one that I was at the time, and had a great success there. Suddenly went on for like 2 years. He would get fan mail like back then. Once again, there's no internet, no email. So I went into his apartment once, and there was like bags of like these giant bags, like trash bag sized bags. What is it? I said, what is that? He goes, it's fan mail. I said, really? He goes, yeah. All these people send into the show. He goes, look at some of them. So we opened up with some of them. There's these letters from girls, of course. And, oh, hey, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And they would say things like, call me. So he said, do you want to call one of them? I said, okay, let's call him. So he calls one. He goes, hi, this is Sally. She's like, yeah. He goes, hi, this is Chris from The Guys Next Door. She's like, what? And they were like talking. He had the whole success, but then the show got canceled after a couple of years. And then suddenly he couldn't get anything else. And he eventually he just decided to give up on everything and just move back to like Oregon, and he became like a construction worker or something like for the rest of his career. So even if you have massive success, it doesn't guarantee that it's going to stay. You know what I mean? Or that you're going to want to.
So much success in the entertainment industry, it's not necessarily tied to your skill. It's tied to some things that are within your control, like your talent, your sense of presence, your ability to deliver lines, ability to memorize lines, and to show up when you're supposed to. But so much of it's outside of your control, like your looks. You can't change how you were born and how you look. You got the face structure you got, and if you do surgeries, you start looking weird. And then, did you sleep with the right person? Did the marketing team know what to do with the product you actually got into? Because over the past couple of years, the number of movies that absolutely bombed, but when I saw them, they were brilliant. I mean, it's more than what I can count on 2 hands. And I feel so awful because these were people at the top of their craft, really delivering, and the marketing guys didn't know what to do, so no one saw it. And that's a travesty. And you never know when lightning is going to strike and if it's going to strike where you're at. Same thing in the writing industry. The publishers invest so little in their people. The only marketing you're going to get is basically what you do on your own. They don't really give advances like they used to. So where's the money at? And just the statistics of the numbers of books that sell more than 1,000 copies a year, it is stacked against almost all the books that are out there. In the past, these figures, like the casting agents and these publishers, their editors, their agents, they were gatekeepers to the industry. And if you could get in, maybe you'd get lucky, maybe you wouldn't. But if you wanted the heights of success, you had to go through them because they controlled the printers, they controlled the cameras, they controlled the studios. But today, what do they really have to offer? Because you could grab your phone, go out and film a 5-second goofy video and get 20 million views. And that's more views than an agent might ever get you, and more YouTube revenue than an agent might ever be able to get you. So you don't need them. And in publishing, self-publishing options, small press options these days, they're far more viable than they were in the past. If I put out a short story or a video of my own, I can guarantee it's going to be what I want it to be. I don't have to compromise my artistic vision for somebody who would probably try to gut it. Actually, I have had that happen where they gutted a short story that I did. They took out the most gut punch part of it. It's okay. I got the rights to it now. I can do whatever I want to with it because they thought it was too raw. Well, I mean, that's what the story is. And what are they going to give you in return? It's kind of like making a deal with the devil. They offer you stuff, but is it going to be worth the cost to you? I don't know.
Right.
So it's encouraging that we have the freedom to do this interview right now. No one's stopping us from doing it. We have the equipment. We have the means. Just a little bit of learning. We can make this happen. The videos that I put up, with some free but powerful editing software, I make it look like it's part of a 70s movie, which is an aesthetic that I love.
I noticed that was the dust and scratches. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a great time to be creating.
What software are you using?
DaVinci Resolve. I'll be glad to post the link to where you get that in the comments. And believe me, when I make enough money off of the ad revenue, I will buy the official version, but it's fully legal for me to have the version that they gave me.
Easy to learn, or that?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Very easy.
Because I've been using like Clipchamp, just the Microsoft one. It's just too short.
Oh, your videos have looked good. The ones I've seen, they've all looked good.
String them together, yeah. But yes, exactly. I'm on the gatekeeping thing. Right now, yes, absolutely, with doing your own thing, being out there, 100,000%. The only things right now that the kind of the gatekeepers still have, as far as the agencies are concerned, like Hollywood agents and things like that, is they still have access to what's called the breakdown. And what the breakdowns are is that's all the major studio productions that are going on. All the major studio production and casting notices that come out onto the wire that only the agents see. And then the agents are the ones that says, "Oh, looks like Arnold Schwarzenegger is doing this new action movie, and they need a sleazy guy to be the strip club owner or something." Well, let's send in Mark, let's send in Joey, let's send in Billy, let's send in these 1,000 people. You know what I mean? Submit their pictures to this studio film, and then that's kind of the barrier to entry where they still operate as far as that level. Versus where nowadays there's another level now that's lower than that we have access to independently as actors. You don't get access to the main breakdowns, but you get access to like the more subset of even the more B movie level stuff where we can actually see those breakdowns now and send it from ourselves. So I can see something, oh, Warner Brothers is doing a music video. I don't know who the star is, but I send in for it, suddenly it's Kesha, you know what I mean, or something like that. You go through an audition, get cast. But real quick on the look thing, so yes, the reason I grow out the hair crazy and the sideburns and everything kind of crazy is because when I first got back in, like all the other times in the movie business, I always had normal, just short haircut.
So hearing you talk about Virgil Fry and how he taught a variety of techniques, that method acting and the Meisner school, I believe you mentioned, that reminds me of this anecdote of a scene where Laurence Olivier and Dustin Hoffman were going to be in it together. I don't know how true it is. I just remember having heard it. And Laurence Olivier, famous actor, great actor, they're both great actors, was waiting, and Dustin Hoffman comes running up, and he's been running for miles, and he's sweating, and he's winded, and he's tired. And Laurence Olivier kind of skeptically looks at him and says, "What are you doing?" Dustin Hoffman says, "I'm getting into character because in this scene, the character's exhausted. So if I'm exhausted, I can do a better job portraying him. I mean, if you don't do that, what do you do?" And Laurence Olivier just looked at him with disdain and said, "I act." It's,
Yeah, that's funny. It's actually true, really. Where I kind of, I mean, on both ends, but it's funny when Laurence Olivier says that because his thing is kind of more true than Hoffman's as far as. So yeah, it's interesting because people are like that, where they get so much into the method thing, where they'll do that, where they'll get so into it. For me, like in Dustin's case, oh, I'm supposed to be exhausted, so I'm exhausted. For me, when I try to get into something like that, I would tailor it more towards an emotional thing versus some physicality like that, where he manifested from not only emotional, mentally, but to a physicality of being exhausted. Same thing with versus just pretending it like or acting like Olivier.
Is a good comparison. Method acting is like channeling your own experience for
Right.
the occasion,
Exactly.
whereas the Meisner is more put yourself in this situation and react
Yeah,
accordingly.
exactly. Yeah, they have a special phrase for it. I forget what it's called. It's called living in the imaginary world or something like that. There's some phrase for Meisner. But yes, exactly like that. So for me, I only would tend to use it more towards maybe an emotional thing versus, oh, I'm going to get all exhausted because I'm supposed to be exhausted in a scene. So I guess there's different levels for different people. Some people like that, like Dustin Hoffman, they want to actually become the character. Like in the Tommy Wiseau movie about his film The Room, he would physically become Tommy while dealing with the cast and crew and like in the non-filming times. And that alone can be good, I guess, on some people. On the other people kind of weighs on them on the cast and crew because something you're dealing with, or maybe that person that's doing it, maybe it's good for them, but it's a complex situation to put yourself in. I personally wouldn't go that far. I doubt, but otherwise, yes, it's very interesting how they
Schools of thought, yeah.
schools of thought meet. So what happens is, people get into the movie acting thing for various reasons. Some people they want to become famous. Some people just want to work and perform in a movie or on camera, and that's sort of like the category that I find myself mostly gravitating to. But I've met several actors over the years. A lot of them are younger, where they have this famous bro mentality, like we're going to be famous, bro. And literally, there was a guy. I mean, he's a great kid. I call him a kid. He's actually probably like 35 years old. Actually, this gentleman. He's a good-looking guy. He's a model, but his whole mentality is, "We're gonna be famous, bro. Famous, bro. We're gonna be famous, bro." And he's like walking around doing extra work, going famous, bro. And then like the camera is like 500,000 miles away from the guy, because it's on the main star. Literally, the camera is like 500,000 miles away, and me and this other guy are here. He's like, "The movie's famous, bro. The camera's on us. We're gonna be famous, bro." And he's like, "The camera's like 500,000 miles away. The camera is not seeing us here." He's like, "Yeah, no, we're gonna be famous, bro." Anyway, so their whole mentality is famous. In fact, so much so that I'm gonna write a comedy movie at some point, like a low budget feature called Famous Bro. And it's gonna be about a bunch of like silly actor characters, you know what I mean, that are trying to become famous, bro, or something or whatever, where one of the straight man is trying to be the actor that's trying to just do a normal career, or without being famous, bro. So anyways, yeah, I'm definitely gonna work on that too. And that would actually be much easier to film than like a weird horror film, because the Famous Bro movie would take place in contemporary times, so we could easily shoot in modern day. We just walk out the thing and start shooting. Whereas a horror film, you got to have blood splattered, and you know what I mean. You got to have all these complex situations going on for that kind of thing. Whereas with just a typical talkie, I call them talkie movies, where it's just a bunch of people walking around talking in contemporary time. That'd be much easier to film. So I might have to consider that. Eventually, when I do that, by the way, get your opinion real quick. I'm used to crowdfunding gaming modules, and that's what I do on Kickstarter, and that's not going to change. For the movie, when I go to crowdfund the movie, I would actually do that on Indiegogo, because I don't want to kind of mix the two, confuse people too much, you know what I mean, or something. But more so, Indiegogo allows you to structure your campaign that if you don't reach your goal, you can still get the funds to continue to try to hit the goal. So whereas on Kickstarter, you have to hit the number. So if you say I need $10,000 on Kickstarter, and you don't hit it, you don't get the money. But on Indiegogo, you'll still, if you say I need $10,000 and you get 7,500, you still get the money and continue the project. So anyway, so my point is I would do it on Indiegogo. When the time comes to do it, I'll be doing it on Indiegogo. So anyway, but yeah, the Famous Bro mentality, it's just funny. There's a lot of people out there that like that. And there's most of the other actors that I've met are more like me, where they're just like, okay, if it happens, it happens. Like I said, you can't put time frames on it. For example, you remember the Dos Equis guy with the beard, the most famous man in the world?
Oh, yeah, the most interesting man in the world, yeah.
Right. Well, they didn't see you yet, right? They didn't see you yet. You got the beard and the mustache. But the thing is, okay, that, you see what I mean? And the ascot. How many
exactly.
people have an ascot, right?
I was doing this before then.
That I know that has an ascot, but it's not a regular actor like me, where you have to have I have an ascot too, but I don't wear it for the movie stuff. And most people don't even know what an ascot is, probably, right? Unless they're.
I bet you look good in it though.
Yeah. I'll have to show you. So I'll have to send you one of the pictures I have. On my old headshots with the black hair, I have the ascot on, like I'm.
Oh yeah, do it.
Socialite or something. But most interesting man in the universe. That guy was around for he'd been acting since like the 60s or something. He'd been working like for 30 years as an unknown actor, just working here and there on random things. And then suddenly he got that commercial, and he's like famous overnight suddenly. He's like Famous Bro overnight. Just like that. That's why they had an old joke. I think they said it took 30 years to become an overnight sensation or something. So, I forget who said it, but it took me 30 years to become an overnight success or something. It wasn't that guy, it was somebody else.
I know at least Dave Ramsey, conservative financial guru, has said things like that. 25 years into it, people call me an overnight success. And it's longer now since I'd heard that. But speaking of all these success and roles and Famous Bros and TV shows, what was your first acting role?
So my first acting role, where I actually had to audition and against other actors and then get cast in it, it was a small short film for, I think it was USC, a young African-American woman that was learning to be a director. She wrote a little script, like a 10-minute short story about a brother and a sister talking about their other brother who was working to get in the Olympics or something. And the brother had started committing crimes to get money to support his Olympic dream, got caught and was thrown in jail. So in the scene, I have to tell my sister, that our brother, who she didn't know was doing all this stuff, has done all this stuff and is now in jail. So it was some sort of complex, dramatic little scene. I auditioned for it. I got cast in it. We filmed it. That particular one was filmed on video. Student films sometimes back then were either done on video. Well, they were required to do one on video, one on 16 millimeter, one black and white, one with sound, one without sound, one on 8 millimeter. They had all these different categories, and you had to, as an upcoming director, you had to film a thing under each one of these umbrellas. 8 millimeter with no sound, 8 millimeter with sound, you know what I mean, with talking. So that was the first project I had got cast in. It was a little video thing. I was like 18 years old or something. And I had I had been in acting class for about 3 years at that point with Virgil. And I said, I want to start sending out for stuff. And the only way you could do that back then was because normally you have to have an agent to get you, like I said, to all the big stuff. That's what the gatekeepers are. And nowadays, as far as studio production. So back then, you'd have to rely on student films and non-union productions, which back then you could find out about in various trade papers. There was a trade paper that would come out every week, and you'd buy it at the 7-Eleven. It was called Dramalog back then. Now it's called Backstage, and it's a website. But back then, it was called Dramalog. It was a big paper, and it came out every week. And in there would list casting notices for student films and non-union films. So you'd sit there and you'd read it. Oh, cool, that sounds like me. And then you go like this, and you grab a picture of yourself. You'd have an 8x10 photo. You'd get like 300 made. And then you'd take out a thing called a stapler. And you'd have a thing called a resume on paper. This is for all the young people that don't understand what I'm talking about. You staple your paper resume onto the back of your picture, staple it, and then you'd put it in this thing called a manila envelope and mail it in. Sit there and write out a bunch of addresses and then mail this thing out to each of the casting notices. So you might be sending out 10 a week, maybe 20 a week to random people's casting project. And then you'd hope that a thing called the telephone would ring, this old-fashioned thing you'd pick up and say hi to the telephone call. Or you'd have a thing called an answering machine, which was this thing to record messages.
For the Zoomers, a telephone, you actually have one on your cell phone. It's more than just an internet gateway. You can talk to people on it too.
Exactly, you can talk to people on it. So, but that was the thing. It was so manual back then. But that was just the way reality was for everyone without modern technology.
Yeah, just think of all the physical things that you just talked about. You had to print out a photo. Yes. You had to type up and print out a paper resume. You had to physically bind them. You had to put them in the physical thing. You had to pay for all those things. Then you had to pay for the postage after you found out through some phone book or some other print media where to even send it. You had to send a whole bunch of them. So you were in some money. And it's not like you can just endlessly reproduce digital things today with a click of an email button and now you're to 1 million folks. And when you're talking about the student film, all those different reels, that cost money too. And that was physical stuff. Like when you ran out of film, you ran out of film. And students weren't known for having a lot of money back then.
Exactly. And that's a great point, because when you were an actor performing in those things, you had to be super on edge that you weren't going to mess up because you wanted to don't blow film. You know what I mean? Because if you screw up in the middle of the scene,
the big scene,
then that's the end of the thing. Yeah, you got to reshoot it. Unless you're Robert Rodriguez, who ingeniously got around that stuff. Like when he was making El Mariachi, he didn't have a lot of money and he didn't have a lot of film. So he was filming like the main guy, like in this action scene, like going up like a staircase in the back of like an apartment thing or something. And then the guy's supposed to throw his guitar up to the landing area and then jump and climb. But when he threw the guitar, it didn't make it. It fell back down and he caught it in his hand. Okay. Now he got all that in the wide shot. And he was like, oh shit, we got to redo it. He's like, no, it was good up to the point of when you threw it. So now what we're going to do is he would punch in, get a little closer shot, and just say, throw the guitar. And then we'll take it from there.
The miracle of editing.
It's the miracle of editing. And just thinking out of the box like that, where it was already good up to that point. So we'll just punch in now and take it from there rather than reshooting again. So he did all those kinds of tricks in there and was able to, when you see that film, it looks like a gigantic studio production, even though it was done for like $8,000 or something on 16 millimeter back in 1990. So
you raise a great point in that limitations can breed creativity because you've got this vision, but you've only got these resources. How do you make the two match? And a lot of people think, well, I don't have my $15 million. I can't make my dream movie. I'm not going to bother even trying. But some of the biggest success stories in the film industry have been shoestring budgets with lots of creativity. That's how Peter Jackson became known, because of that horrible alien movie that I thought it was just boring, where cannibal aliens came down, bad taste, but it got him on the scene. And then he went on to do Lord of the Rings, which I think was the best movie ever made. Then there's the Evil Dead series. Got started on a shoestring budget with really creative, very motivated people. If they had had the comfort of a bigger budget, would they have made as good a movie? I don't know that they would have.
Right. You're absolutely right, because when you have suddenly these limitations based on finances, like, oh, we can't shoot that scene. We want to shoot that scene with other stuff happening. We can't do it. well, how do you work around that or somehow still manage to do it, but somehow on the budget that you can do it on? Just it breeds the creative solutions like that with the thing. So real quick, I want to stay on the movie thing, but in that same vein of thought, being creative around this problem, in Hanging Coffins, the first module I wrote, on the back cover had a problem. The back cover suddenly, on a normal module like TSR, you had other modules to fill up space.
Right.
You list all your other modules, right? But I didn't have any other modules because I only had the one. I didn't even conceptualize that I'd have I'm going on 25 now or something between the 5e variations and everything else. I never even conceptualized. In fact, if you would have told me that back then, I probably would have got nervous and got the hell out of it or something. But the bottom line is this. So on the back of my first module, I had all this dead space. Okay, and I was like, what am I going to do with that dead space? I don't have something to put there. And then once again, inspiration from nothing, like what you said, happened. I go, okay, well, what can I invent to put there? And then I thought, hey, how about if I have pre-generated characters, why don't I have them make a funny quote, like lamenting about some encounter in the module that killed them or got them upset about something or made them disappointed.
And that was funny and original.
There you go, exactly. It turned out to be funny and original. And I started putting like 3 or 4 on there, and that suddenly solved the problem. And it added humor and another kind of facet to, I guess, what you call the trade dress or something, right? As far as the trade dress of the modules. Yeah. But now suddenly on every back cover of the major 1E modules, I have a thing where there's like at least 3 quotes from the pre-generated characters, like complaining about something or lamenting about the writer. But yeah, so that does breed that, whether you're making a film or a book or anything. Definitely, I agree. So that could be a benefit in a way. I guess when somebody comes across that situation, try to think of it as not a detriment, but a benefit to the project, because now you can think about it outside the box, and that'll make your project even more unique suddenly compared to others.
And it's kind of a way of making you prove that you want it, that you're going to do the extra work, whatever that is, to make up for the resources you don't have. Because creativity is a better resource than a budget, because you see big budget movies these days, they're plastic, fantastic, boring. They're a waste of your time. But some small budget movies these days are doing really creative things and are very much worth your time. So beware of becoming too comfortable, I guess is a lesson that we could take away from this.
Right. Also, when we're talking about the concept of making a movie project, in modern times now, we have the benefit now of taking our cell phone camera out and we can make a movie. But the traditional way, with all the big pomp and circumstance of having the cameras and all that stuff and a more coordinated effort, it does take a lot of effort. So for example, when I did all my Doritos commercials or short films I worked on, even just coordinating one day is like coordinating like a wedding day. You've got to have the camera people there. You've got to have all these actors there. You've got to have bathrooms for them to use the bathroom in. You've got to have tables and chairs for them to sit at. You've got to have snacks, food for them to eat. You've got to have all this like logistical stuff there, in addition to knowing what the scenes you're going to shoot for the day. And everything is totally planned out, by the way, or at least on my productions and most productions, when you go into it, on that shooting day, you know at 9 a.m., that's when you're doing your first shot. You know that first shot is this scene, scene A, scene 2B or whatever. It's the close-up of this, it's the 2 shot of that. And you schedule how long it's going to take. So, for example, from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m., you're doing this scene with these people. From 10 a.m. to 11, it's this other scene. From 12 to whatever. This way suddenly, oh shit, we're behind schedule. We're already at 11:30. We still haven't finished the scene yet. Everything is very coordinated. Everything is very complicated. It takes a lot of people. And that's even just doing it for one day. If you're doing a feature film, it's going to take 7 to 10 days, 14 days. You got to have all this stuff happening every single shooting day when you've got all these people that you're responsible for and all this stuff that come to show up, whether they're cast or crew. I mean, even just on one of my Doritos commercials alone, the tuxedo one, was like 28 people there that day between cast and crew, all having to be coordinated and, all expecting an answer from you. It's a complicated thing, especially when you're the guy in charge. It's just nothing but answering questions from the production, from shooting, what you want to shoot, to the camera guys and the grips involved, the actors, what they're going to need to do, and just other general things. Where's the bathroom? Where's the station? You have to have all the stuff. Anyways, but yeah.
When creating, you need to have a vision, but you also need to know the logistics to get you to where you need to be. So yeah, the great point you brought up. Now, it looks like in many of the roles that I've seen you in that you fill a particular niche that the filmmakers want to have. They think, okay, I want someone who kind of gives off that 70s Ron Jeremy vibe, but none of the baggage of actually being Ron Jeremy, and frankly, better looking at this point. So why is it that that's your thing? And why is it that you're the one who really scratches that itch for filmmakers?
I can give you, I think, my theory. Even when I was young, I just had normal person look. Normal short haircut, nothing crazy going on, no sideburns, no mustache, just normal person. And I didn't get anything. Years later, in 2001 to 2003, normal person, kind of barely got anything going on. Fast forward to 2011, back in this, once again, short hair, normal person, no sideburns, no mustache, no nothing going on. So I had the normal guy looks all the time, and I just wasn't quite fitting in for something. And I would see parts like the sleazy strip club owner or the sleazy whatever, or movie producer or something like that. And I think of guys that like sideburns and mustaches. And I was thinking, well, why don't I just try that? Well, I'll just kind of grow out my sideburns, kind of crazy, and grow a mustache and, and let my hair go a little bit more wild. Because in reality, when you go out for a part, no matter whether you look like this or whether you look like a normal person, what happens is, so you go on an audition for some other production, and they see that you have a beard or a mustache or something like that. They might say, okay, are you willing to shave? And 99% of the time, say, yes, no problem. Unless you're booked on another project that requires you to have all that stuff, like then you can't shave. You know what I mean? So you just say, sorry, I'm on this other project. I can't do that. Now, real quick on that same note, a couple months ago, I auditioned for some major company. I forget what it was, a major product brand. I did the first audition, then I went to the callback. And the callback audition, the way the first audition works is just you and a casting director and a camera, and that's it. But our callback audition, that's when they've narrowed down all the rabble to get to like maybe 20 guys that they're going to have to call back on. These are the guys that are now the main contenders now. So you go in for the callback audition. So I went in for the callback audition, and in the callback audition, generally, especially for a commercial, you got the director there, the producer there, the ad agency people, the people from the company. So let's just say it was Coca-Cola or something, which I've done before also. It never got released, but there's a lot of people there. Okay, there might be like 20 people there on the other side of the camera, right? Okay, so on that one, I forget what brand it was, the casting guy again said, oh, are you willing to shave or cut your hair? And before I could answer, the director guy sitting goes, no. He says, you look perfect as you are. We're not cutting out any. He goes, we're not shaving or cutting anything. And then the casting guy was like, okay. And I said, okay, yes, no problem. Then that was funny because that was the first time that I ever had where the director himself was like, oh, no. You look at the perfect look for what we want. Anyways, ultimately, I didn't get the part, but I did well at the callback. They had me stay there for like 15 minutes going back and forth, which was a very good sign. But that just goes to show you also, even if they like you, you still may not get it. And it's not just because you did a bad job acting, or just maybe some nuance of some other person just had a little bit of some extra thing. The director might want you, but the ad agency people and the company might suddenly say no. And then that's that. So it's just how the nature of the beast when you're doing it. So that's why I said there's always a million reasons that an actor didn't get a part. It's not just because they were like, did a bad job. There's just all these other factors. Maybe they don't match right for the family that they're supposed to be attached to,
right,
or whatever other forces. They're too tall, or they're too skinny. You know it when you see it. When you've done casting before, like I've been on the other side of the coin, doing casting for my own projects, where I've had to call actors in to audition for me that were strangers I didn't know. And you just kind of know it when you see it. When you see the guy or the woman that's right for the part, they do the right performance. They have the right look. Suddenly, it's just you know it when you see it. Then you cast them, and then hopefully it works out. Usually, it works out fine. Speaking of casting, when they were casting Gilligan's Island, originally they wanted somebody other than Bob Denver, but then Bob Denver came in, and they're like, "Oh, this is the guy." But one other funny thing about that was for the skipper, they had auditioned Carol O'Connor, who plays Archie Bunker.
Oh yeah.
Carol O'Connor came in to audition for the skipper. Now, of course, he didn't get cast, and you can clearly see why. Like, can you imagine? His energy is completely different. You see what I mean? Versus like Alan Hale Jr.
Oh yeah.
See what I mean? You can just kind of know it when you see it. But it's so funny when you think of Carol O'Connor auditioning for the skipper on Gilligan's Island because he's such a downbeat Carol O'Connor.
That'd have been a different character. Yeah.
It would have been a completely different vibe, and it wouldn't have been funny suddenly when he's hitting Gilligan. You know what I mean?
It would have been more pathetic, I think.
Yeah, it would have been weird. Once again, you kind of know it when you see it. You know what I mean? As far as when you're auditioning somebody for a part.
I got you. Like and so of all your roles to date, which one are you most proud of? And this could be student film, this could be released film, this could be music video. Which one are you happiest with?
Yeah, I think the one that I'm happiest with, which was sort of the biggest one, it's a low budget feature film called Tiny Tim's. It's about a used car lot. I've got a couple of, they're all the downbeat guys with the funny outfits and hats. I play a character called Mr. Onofrio in that. My biggest part ever, like I'm in like 5 major scenes in the whole movie with lots of dialogue and stuff. So it's sort of the biggest project that I'm in depth into as far as performance wise. And we also had a premiere and everything. We won a festival award for comedy film. It was a fun experience to go through. We had the whole red carpet thing at the festival and got pictures with everything. But anyways, and you know what? That was in like January of 2020 before COVID hit, thank God. Otherwise, it would have ruined our whole premiere thing with the red carpet thing. Anyways, yeah, we did that in January 2020 as far as the film festival. But anyway, so that was one of the most biggest projects I'm most proud of. Other ones I really like being part of, but they never amounted to, they never became anything, was other little projects. There was one where it was a guy trying to make a feature film about zombie boxing league, about zombie boxers or something. I've casted it as guy that runs the boxing ring of zombies, or whatever, like the asshole businessman, the corrupt, crooked businessman running the zombie boxing ring thing. That was a really neat project, but it never was able to come to fruition. Like you say, on IMDb, I have 76 credits. In reality, there's probably like 150 floating around out there in total with those.
Oh, wow.
You know what I mean? The projects that never got completed, that never ended up being on IMDb like that.
But you did the work.
But you did the work. And I still have footage of it actually in one of my demo reels.
That's what you have done. If you could pick, and sky's the limit here, I don't care what the casting profile is for it or not, what would be your dream role to act, to portray?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because so far I've only played a lot of just kind of character archetypes, like the strip club owner, or the sleazy movie producer, or the sleazy car lot guy. Yeah, I'm not sure off the top of my head. I would say something like maybe more serious, dramatic role, because I played a lot of comedy stuff. So I would say maybe a more serious, dramatic role. I don't mind doing the comedy stuff, and it seems to be what fits me. But to answer your question, so I'd probably like to do more of a like serious, dramatic role if I had a chance to do one. Would be
Is there a particular character that you wish you could get to portray at some point?
I don't know. I mean, anything will be fine. Maybe the typical thing of like a creative type that's once again goes from being down and out to having some kind of moniker and success, something, whether it's being a writer or actor or performer or a businessman or something. That could be something that could see maybe.
Okay. Gotcha.
What we were talking about when I said, so I grew out all the hair and stuff, this crazy look. You were asking about the look. Why do they cast me?
Mm-hmm.
So real quick, I'll wrap that up real quick. So I started growing out the kind of crazy look around 2015. I just started looking having normal sideburns. I said, let me go a little crazy. And I said, oh, who cares? It's going to go wild. Because the reason was I was seeing a lot of parts that said 70s, 80s, 1970s look, 1980s look. It would tell you in the casting notice, sleazy guy, 1970s. Okay, well, let me grow my hair, sideburns big, let me grow my hair bigger, mustache. Suddenly I started doing that, and I started putting the outfits on. Let me put some weird outfit together now, because once again, my normal headshot just looks like a normal guy, like a business suit. Hi, I'm a normal person with a business suit. Next, I mean, who cares? You're out of here. So when I started putting on the funny outfits, the character outfits with the hair and everything and the hat, I found this hat somewhere or hat somewhere. Suddenly, I invented a look that the directors or casting people didn't maybe even conceptualize until they saw the picture. Oh, look at this asshole. My friend, who's this a-hole? Whoa, this guy really, look at these sideburns and this, call that guy in. Tell him to wear that outfit. Suddenly I go in and they tell me, wear that outfit. I go in, oh man, blah, blah, blah. And then I started getting more jobs because I started to cultivate a unique look that suddenly the other people weren't thinking of consciously. They were just thinking, thinking in terms of, oh, look at this.
You gave them something to think about.
Exactly. Gave them like some meat on the bone with a weird kind of persona or look and feel that they didn't quite realize until they saw it. Then it's like, that's what we want. We want that. You know
and then they realized they wanted it and they had to have more of it. Okay, we're at less than 1 minute.
Right.
And so we'll let you get for now.
So I growing out all this hair and stuff like that for different parts. Now, one thing you don't want to do is go and get a haircut in the middle of something if you're up for a part or not. So this kind of happened to me accidentally as one of the learning processes of the thing. Several years ago, before I was this crazy with my hair, I was starting to get the hair kind of crazy. So I had sent in for some crime reenactment show. They were looking for like guy number 3, victim number 3, or guy number 7, just some innocuous character. They didn't really describe anything specific about the hair or the look. They just like man, 40s to 50s, black hair, something like that. So I had sent in for some parts like that in these crime reenactment shows. And then I had sent in for one something innocuous like that, nothing specific about the hair. So I said, okay, let me go get a haircut. It was driving me crazy. It was a hot day. So I went and got my haircut and wasn't even thinking about it back then. So I just got it cut short. I think this is probably what started the staying long on me, because back then I would just still get it cut short and kind of grow it out. Anyways, got it cut short again, thinking that there was nothing specific about that one part. I get home an hour later, I get a message saying, hey, guess what? We want to cast you in our TV show. And I go, oh, is it for guy number 3? And they're like, no, we want you to be the lead character of the serial killer, Henry Lee Lucas. And I was like, okay, cool. And I was like, well, I just got my hair cut. And they're like, what? I go, yeah, I just got my hair cut. They go, send us a picture. So I sent them a picture, and they're like, oh, we needed you with that crazy hair. And I was like, oh, man. I said, I'm so sorry. I said, I was sending in for like murder victim number 3 or something. Like, no. Because that's the other reality is, too, was not just that, but I sent in for murder victim number 3. But when they saw me, they were thinking, hey, this guy's better for the lead role. And you don't know that. You see what I'm saying? Until they call you. You know what I mean? It's just another thing with the business. Funny things about the movie business that you aren't aware of. Now I know, well, whenever I send in for anything, they're going to consider me for anything, no matter what I'm sending in for.
Oh, my God. Missing out on a lead part because you got to trim. Oh.
Yeah, just because I went with an hour's time. If I hadn't done that. Another one real quick was similar was Ghost Adventures. You know, that TV show Ghost Adventures on the Travel Channel? That was my favorite show. Oh, there you go. Talk about something that I'm super happy to be proud of to be on. Was Ghost Adventures was always my favorite TV show back in 2004 when it came out. You know, that's the show on the Travel Channel where those 3 guys, they would run around and yell and scream at the ghosts. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, especially Zach. He'd say, I hear you've been threatening women. Why don't you threaten me? And then like waiting for the ghost to jump on him or something. So that was always my favorite show. And they would do little reenactments in those shows. And never once, because that was when I had given up on acting, 2004 and then on. And they came out in 2004. So I used to watch that show all the time from 2004 all the way up to 2012 or 13 when I had cable TV. I would watch that show as my favorite show. Never once in a million billion years did I ever think that in 2015 suddenly I would get cast in an episode of Ghost Adventures in the reenactment scenes. In 2015, I sent in for a job at Ghost Adventures. They need a guy that looks like the real life guy that they think killed the Black Dahlia. That looked just like him for some reason. Mustache, black hair, black sideburns, everything, right? So I sent in for it. And then suddenly they contacted me. They said, hey, you look great. They said, there are 2 things. They said, do you still have the mustache? And I said, yeah. And then they go, okay, number 2. They said, it says that you weigh 215 pounds. Is that all in your stomach? Or something? Or they said, can you send us a full body picture? And I was like, yeah, okay, no problem. So suddenly I'm like sucking in my gut in, getting a selfie done at my mom's. I was taking care of my mom at the time. And I quickly sent it into them. And then thank God, within like a few minutes, they called me and said, okay, you got it. You're going to be, Dr. George Hodel was his name, he was the suspect. Okay, they said, okay, you got the part. And they sent me a picture. The guy looks just like me also. That's also why I got it. With my weird mustache and the black hair. Anyways, if you see the 2, I'll send you the link.
I saw that clip, and it was really creepy. It was.
Oh, okay. Yeah. We filmed that whole thing. We did that in 2 days. And there was even more stuff that they had filmed that we just didn't use on that episode. They had me like outside howling at the moon or something and all this stuff. I had to drag the body around on the ground, whatever. They said we cutting her up or something in like the bathtub. So yeah, never once in a million years did I ever think I'd end up on the show suddenly as an actor, my favorite TV show. And that was something that was a real thing that I thought was fun, just because it happened to be my favorite show. And never once did I ever imagine being in a role on it. You know what I mean? Especially because during the majority of that time, I wasn't even back in acting yet. Anyway.
So did you ever see yourself as a regular in music videos, though? Because by my count, you've done at least 17 of them.
Correct. And once again, that's the 17 that got released. There was also another, batch that didn't ever get released. Or videos where those are the 17 where I'm actually a part of it, like a role or a small role that's actually featured in there of those 17. There's a whole other bits I don't show on there where basically you didn't even see me. I was just a general background or something. So I don't even really include them in that batch. But the ones on YouTube are the ones where you pretty much have me at least in one scene where I'm doing something specific. But yeah, so as far as did I see myself doing music videos? Not really. I mean, it was just another job. when you set out for the jobs, all the jobs that are coming in right now are either music videos or feature films, low budget independent feature films like for streaming, or short films. Once again, same thing. Schools are still needing actors to do short films, and music videos are real popular on there too. So,
is it a different experience working on a music video set versus working on a movie set?
yes, the difference is in the music video, generally you have to get every single thing done in that day. So
Okay.
when the music video in general, a music video is shot in one day, generally. So no matter whether they're outside talking or they're inside at the bar drinking booze, all that stuff has to get filmed in the span of one day. Whereas in a movie, you kind of have a little bit more loosey-goosey schedule sometimes in just a given day. You're just only filming a handful of scenes. Whereas in a music video, you might have having to do like 20 or 30. Whereas in a movie, you might only be doing like 7 or something.
Gotcha. So on YouTube, I went down your playlist of music videos, the 17 that got posted there, and there were some of them that really stuck out to me. And so I wanted to ask you if you had particular takes or memories, things that were important to you from those videos. And if you don't have any, that's fine. Of course, we got to talk about Kasha's My Own Dance, where you're the patriotic Speedo dancer. Now, it felt like a great role for you because I know you're a patriot yourself. You love this
Yes,
country.
yes, yes.
So they cast you appropriately. You were selling the scene. Now, there was a point where I had to avert my eyes for a second because there was a little more Mark than I wanted to see. But tell us
Yes.
how that went.
Oh, okay. So a couple interesting things about that particular video. Originally, when I saw the casting notice for it, it just said Warner Brothers Records. It didn't say Kesha, and I didn't even know who Kesha was at that time. In the actual casting notice, they were originally looking for an older man, like in his 70s or something, or 60s, it said, 60s or 70s. It's an older man dancing naked. So right off the bat, normally I would go, okay, done, you know what I mean? But I was like, well, they don't know what they don't know, narcissistically speaking, as far as like we're saying, where once they see the picture, they might change their mind about the age. Okay, in other words, you see what I mean? Once again, I thought, well, they have. I know this sounds narcissistic, but it's true. It is. But the point is that we're going back to that whole image picture thing. Like I said, they don't know until they see something. You know what I mean? It gives them an idea. Hey, this is what we want. So I said, okay, well, let's just send in. Who cares? I'm not 70 years old. I'm 50, whatever. I'll send in the picture of the thing with all the regular. You know what I mean? So I sent it in, and then sure enough, the next day, I was filming a movie at a small part of the movie, that Matchstick Flame movie. When I got home, I got the call suddenly. It said, "Hey, I'm the casting director." Or no, sorry. It said, "Okay, we want you to audition." They said for the music video and do a home audition at home. It was 2019, and they said just dance around in like some underwear and play a song behind you. I said, well, what song? They said any kind of song like Madonna or something, any kind of song. So how about Madonna's Vogue? Because it's supposed to be doing like a silly, sexy dance. So I thought that might be funny. Okay, yeah, do that. Okay, so I suddenly film a video audition in like not Speedos, but like black little underwear. And I put on Vogue, okay, on my thing, because I thought that would be the most ironic, hilarious thing to have a fat man, you know what I mean, dancing like a
And this
model.
is a mental image I'll never get rid of. Thank you very much, Mark.
Exactly. That's the point. I'm trying to destroy you mentally now, so we're breaking you
Put that
down.
in your next module. You'll destroy the party.
Exactly. Destroy the party with that. Just like in acting class, you got to face your fears, whatever, right? And that's a big one right there. That's okay. So now, but notice how we're already past. Once again, we could have just ignored this whole thing. I could have not even sent in when I saw an older man in his 70s, right? Now, normally I only send in the parts that fit me. But in this case, just something told me send in for it. Otherwise, normally I would have ignored that part. You know what I mean? Out of my age rate. So I did the audition, and then suddenly I sent it in, and like the next day I get the call saying, "Hey, I'm the casting director for Warner Brothers, whatever music video." They said, "I just want to tell you 3 things." What? She goes, well, the woman, she goes, "Kesha loves you, the director loves you, and I love you. We want to cast you as the naked man dancing in the music video." I was like, oh, okay, fantastic. Thanks a lot. She goes, yeah, I know you did great. And we want to cast you, but it's going to be naked. And we're going to put blur thing on there. And I was like, okay, sure. Yeah, no problem. Whatever. Yeah, sounds great. Okay, great. Okay, we'll send you the details, blah, blah, blah. And we'll be shooting in 2 days. Thanks. Okay, bye. Okay, wonderful. Great. Looking forward to working with you. Bye. And I'm like, what? So I immediately call Brent Allen. And they go, hey, guess what? I got cast in this Kesha video, and I'm going to have to be dancing naked or something. He was like, what? He's like, are you out of your effing mind? You can't be dancing naked in a catch video. We're going to blur out. I go, what do you mean? He goes, well, what if there's some problem or some rogue editor or something to get the footage out? I go, I didn't think of that. But we went ahead and it was funny. And he realized, okay, yeah, you go ahead and do it. But it was funny because his initial was, I was all happy. Like, but his initial reaction was like, are you out of your effing mind? You can't do that. So, but was a good also reality check. Anyway, so fast forward when we were going to do the video, suddenly on set, they decided, they're like, okay, we changed it to, and we're going to do it in the Speedos instead. I said, okay, yeah, no problem. Like, yeah, but up to that point, I still was thinking it was going to be, they had said, we're going to have a closed set when you do it. They said the only people that will be there would be the camera person, the director, and like Kesha or something like that. So the director was a woman, by the way. The camera person. I said, okay, fine. Anyway, so when it got there, they said, okay, just within like an hour or two of shooting, they're like, okay, we're going to do this thing in Speedos. So I said, okay, fine. We got two different Speedos here. She goes, we got small and large. She goes, which one do you want? And I go, well, Speedos are for. I go, which one do you think would accentuate everything best? And she goes, the small. Okay. She hands me the Speedo, which I've never worn Speedos before in my life. And there is a thing called a banana hammock in there, but let's not go any further. But anyways, like, where's the hammock go with the banana or the hammock or the coupons go into the hammock also? Where is it supposed to? Anyway, so long story short, so we did the shoot in the videos and I did the same silly dance. And of course, on the shoot, once again, this goes back to my thing about the shower exercise when I was 18 and terrified to do that. Now, here we are in the real life situation that improv exercise was teaching you how to deal with. Because now here I am suddenly standing, basically I'm butt naked with the Speedos on, with the gold medallion in a room with like 30 freaking production people, with the camera people. And then Kesha shows up. We're preparing to do the shoot. Kesha comes in and walks right up to me and puts her arm around me. And she turns to the crew and she goes, yeah, if I saw this guy in here dancing, I'd come in and join him. I was like, and then suddenly you laughed or whatever. I said, thank you for casting me. Oh yeah, you're doing great. You're doing great. And okay, then we have to quickly do the scene because now we're back to business. Because, like I said, when doing a music video, there's not a lot of time to monkey around. You gotta move on a tight schedule, getting everything done. So in other words, that whole sequence of me dancing in the room, from the moment she's outside looking in to me jiggling around dancing, it's like a 45-second scene or something, maybe, or like a 30-second scene. Yeah, it goes by quick. But that took about an hour to shoot.
Okay.
From all they had to get the different angles and then, all the different stuff like that. So 3 or 4 different setups. So that's how that happened. But there was so many things that could have went sideways in that process all the way from the beginning where I wouldn't have even sent in for that job. But then by doing so, it proved my other theory that once they see something about you, so that's how it works.
So a music video that involves you being very clothed is Miami Horror's Restless video. And frankly, you dominated almost every scene of that video as the tennis instructor. Yeah.
Okay.
It was good. I liked it. What'd you think about it?
Okay, thanks for that. I am fortunate that I was able to do a performance that you said turned out well. You felt?
Oh yeah.
Character.
Oh yeah.
Once again, in that one, in the initial audition, I kind of almost didn't even send in for it because I didn't feel that I was that kind of a character. Because in the initial audition, they sent back more of like a guy, like more of a handsome kind of like Tony Robbins type person. You know what I mean? With like a sample pictures of the ideal of the motivational speaker. What happened was they sent an improv script. They said, this is going to be an improv script for the audition. They said, you are like a guru with a bunch of people that you control. They didn't tell me about tennis. Okay, and nothing to do with tennis. This is you're a guru in control of a bunch of people, and suddenly one of them did something wrong, and you get extremely upset about the situation and start screaming at them or something. Okay, so I went and did this whole improv. In fact, I have it on my channel. If you want to see it, I'll send it to you or whatever. The actual audition for that video that got me the job. So I did an improv audition. It turned out kind of funny. And I sent it into them. And then suddenly they called me and said, hey, you got this job. You're just Miami Horror. You're going to be the tennis guru. I was like, okay. So they just kind of briefly explained what it was. And I just kind of instantly knew, okay, let me have this weird attitude. They said you'll have this attitude like because he's a young guy. And then from that moment on, the whole thing kind of just fell into play as far as the presence of what I was doing, being angry or whatever with everybody or being very disciplinary and with all the people.
So I think the song was good too. So it's not like you're in a music video for a song that sucked. No, the song was good and you chewed up all the scenery. I was like, my boy's representing.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, it was fun to do because that was one of the ones where suddenly See, what's funny is you go from just doing general extra work sometimes where you're just a cog in the wheel and you're like the lowest member on the totem pole.
You're like a plant on the set.
Exactly. Like a plant on the set. To suddenly where now you're in a lead role in the music videos where, you're the main actor guy. Well, me and those other two, the young guy and the young girl. And then the other people were my students. So, but the point is that that's why you do it. Sometimes, some days you're doing the main role. Some days you're suddenly doing a smaller part. But yeah, but I was fortunate I was able to channel that anger or whatever that presence was and then be able to maintain it. Remember, you got to maintain this whole thing suddenly through all these different sequences and keep it consistent, which is tough to do sometimes. But fortunately, I was able to keep it consistent and work. The only thing I regret in that one was I purposely kind of stuck my stomach a little bit fatter than it was. And I hate it. I shouldn't have done that, but they allowed it. They liked it. Now, I always feel weird looking at it now because, like, well, my stomach's not that big. But anyway,
I think it played to the character.
I think it played to the character is what it was. Yeah,
because it was helping portray that he's flawed, but he's bossing all these people around like he knows everything. So, exactly. In an ironic sense, I think it was right.
Yes, also one thing about that one was funny was when I got to that location, that's like a $45 million mansion in Malibu. It looked like it. It is. And that thing goes on and on. That place is huge. The tennis court, that's all part of the property. I mean, it's like a gigantic U-shaped complex. Yeah, it's huge.
That's beautiful. Yeah. What a terrible place to have to film, huh?
Oh, yeah. A terrible place to have to film. And what was funny was when they put me in the outfit, that 70s, they own that outfit, that 70s thing they put me in. People thought I was the owner of the house or something. The other actors, when they showed up, and I was walking around like that with the D-bag outfit on with the gold chains and the ring, they thought I was the owner of the house or something. I said, no, I'm the actor in the video. Like, oh, okay, we thought you were the fucking owner or something.
So the last video I want to bring up is a tonal shift from both of those, and that's Chava Salazar's Facile. Okay. And this one, it was a feels trip. If you haven't watched it at home, I would recommend you do it. You can get it on Mark's YouTube page on his playlist. But just very briefly, it's different eras of the same couple in their relationship, and you're towards further into the relationship. And I thought it was pretty heartbreaking. I thought you were doing a great job portraying on screen what the story was trying to tell. I don't even speak Spanish well enough to have understood the lyrics, but I could follow what it was trying to say. And I thought you were great in it.
Okay, thank you for that. That's another one where I think it was about the guy who was trying to be a writer or something, but he had to carry on his life. He was an alcoholic and he had a wife. Yeah, and
that's the one.
The whole when we were filming it was that I was kind of the deadbeat husband where I was focused more on my writing and on getting a job. So when you saw scenes like they didn't have our dialogue, maybe, but like her and I in the bedroom, I think there's a scene with her and I in the bedroom arguing or something like that. In that scene, we were actually arguing. We did an improv where she's like, well, you just lost your new job and you got to get another job. And she goes, you can't tell off the boss like that. And I said, well, yeah, the guy tells me to put these boxes over there. And I start putting the box over there. He says, no, put the box over there. I said, don't tell me what to do. Like there's some stupid, like I don't understand what work is or something, when there's a boss or something. Anyways, yeah, thank you for that. It worked out well. It was very interesting. And once again, that was around, I think, COVID maybe or something, somewhere around like right before COVID hit, around that. Because the director of that music video was a young Hispanic man. He's about 24, 25 now. I did a short film for him originally for New York Film Academy. And he liked me so much that after we did that short film, he said, hey, I'm going to be doing this music video for this guy in Mexico. And I want you to play the lead. Okay. So that's what happened. That's how I ended up in the music video. We shot it all, but then when COVID hit, everything kind of got discombobulated for a few years. And it just got released like a year or so ago, I think. But we had actually shot it in like 2020 or something.
And the music video itself, it does feel like a short film. It really does. It makes a nice, pretty bow on a sad story, and the production values were good. I would recommend people watch it. It'd be worth your time.
Thanks for that. Too, in that video, when her and I were like in our apartment scenes, like in the bedroom and arguing in the kitchen and all that stuff, that set, the kitchen and the apartment set there in the bedroom, that's actually a real apartment, but it's inside of a building that's a music recording studio in like LA somewhere. And the second floor of that music recording studio building is literally an old looking 1970s apartment that's no longer an apartment for the studio, but they've rented out for filming because it looks like such an old looking location, the room. Perfect. And the kitchen set. In fact, that video we shot there, and then we also shot that other video, but we shot there also for that as well. 2 different film crews, 2 different music videos, same location. This weird little apartment set in like a middle of like a commercial district, and then some audio recording 2-story building. You wouldn't think that that's in there. You know what I mean? You would never realize that that was inside that building.
So a couple of the music videos that I saw on your playlist were Russian language music videos, and they were very Russian in character. There was a lot of criminal underworld stuff going on. What's it like to make a Russian music video?
Funny you brought that up because, okay, so there was 2 different Russian music videos. I was involved in music videos. I also had got cast in a Russian feature film playing a chef character yelling or something in like Italian. And what happens is, of all these things real quick, is I have a Russian actress friend of mine that she's Russian, from Russia. She would see these things suddenly through her natural Russian channel. She's like, how the hell are you getting cast in all these Russian things? Because I'm Russian, I can't get cast in anything. I had sent into these random music videos that came up on the casting line. The first Russian one was that one with where the bad guys are in the truck.
Yeah, where you got ran over. Yeah.
Yeah. I get run over. And by the way, there's another example of how on low budget set, you have to be super careful, like what we want to talk about on the thing that happened with the thing on that Western we won't talk about. But so when you're in doing the stunts, like in that case, I had to actually run. There was no stunt man. I had to run from the truck, the van. And the guy driving the van wasn't the stunt driver. He was my actor friend, another actor guy I know that does stunts as well. So he had to keep it careful. And it was raining suddenly in downtown LA. And I didn't have on normal sneakers. I had on like some kind of weird slippery business shoes. So I had to kind of like run super carefully in the rain while the van is bearing down on me. And I was nervous I was going to fall down or something. But fortunately, I didn't fall down. But yeah, but in the video, I get killed. The van runs me over and they chop me up and serve me in a restaurant or something. But
yeah, it's a grim video. It's worth the watch.
That, and the guy that was in the van driving, his actor, his name is Mike Ferguson. He's sort of like the Caucasian Danny Trejo of nowadays. He's doing like 150 films on IMDb. Yeah, he's like this white guy with tattoos everywhere with like a goatee and stuff. And he's constantly getting jobs all the time. All the time. All these movies. Yeah, all these music videos. He's a great character look. In fact, when I do my project, I'm going to approach him and see if he's available to be like in it as well. And we just worked together in that other film last year, the 7 Days to Hell film. He was the biker boss in that film as well. So that's what happens to you a lot of times when you're an actor out here in Hollywood. You work on all these weird projects. Suddenly, you run into some other actor either on an audition for something because you're all going out for the same stuff. So in other words, when I go on an audition for the sleazy movie producer with the sideburns and the mustache, there's like 20 other guys with sideburns and mustaches that just look as sleazy as me or more. And they're like, oh, hey, how's it going, bro? You know, they're like, there's regulars. And one of us gets it at some point. And then the other one gets the next job and then the next job. So you end up running into the same people sometimes on various projects, whether it's a music video or a short film or a low budget feature.
So the second Russian video where you were a nightclub owner, an abusive nightclub owner.
I'm her manager. I'm supposed to be her. Okay. So that music video, that lady, her name is Molly something or other. Her real
she's
name
hot.
Her real name is like Olga Serabnaya or something. She's like the Russian Madonna or something. Like she gets a lot of views on her videos. And she's put out like hundreds of songs or something, like over 100, dozens and dozens of songs, that lady. So I auditioned for that. I got cast in it. And so what it was like is she's talking in Russian. Like she kept talking Russian to me, even though she speaks English. She's like, and I'm like,
yeah,
and that's
I can't speak it.
Yeah, I was like, hey, baby. And it's a good thing I did that because I go, hey, baby, the time, you got to get on stage, you know. So in the video, you don't hear us talk, but you can see me going like this. Like, so you kind of understand what we're talking about.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it would work that way.
You were good.
Oh, yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, and that was my suitcase full of money. I had that prop with the suitcase full of money and everything. And I'm like a corrupted band manager, and she doesn't sing her song. And I'm like trying to get the money, like where's the money and all that stuff, and I'm doing money.
And she runs it all. Yeah.
Love over the money. Oh, that's right. And then the thing, I come back in her room and I give her the money. And what it was, I gave her a $20 bill.
Yeah.
In the video, I said, now don't spend that all in one place. And that's when she like throws it at me or something and like walks out.
Now, you've also directed and produced. What can you tell us about that? And also, where can people watch some of that stuff? Because I was digging around on IMDb and I saw, The Adventures of Super 7, Judges, After the Blast, but I couldn't find where I could see those things. So can you tell us some about all that?
Yeah. Well, the Super 7 thing was just simply, I wasn't really involved in that per se. I knew the guy remotely that was doing it, but it was the Indiegogo campaign. So as part of the funding of that, you get credit as a associate producer or something like that.
Okay.
For that particular project. But the Judges project is Alan's short film that he wrote, and we produced it. What happened was in 2012, like right around the time when I was starting to do Hanging Coffins in 2013, but I said to Alan, I said, well, we want to do these short films and films we've been talking about all the time. I said, what do we need to do this? What equipment do we need? Because I was doing I had a really good computer job back then, making over six figures from 2011 through 2013, which I had done in the past as well. But back then I was doing really well. So I said, what do we need equipment-wise? What if I just buy like a modern-day DSLR camera at the time, like a digital camera, lenses, or whatever the hell we need? So he said, okay. So he went and researched and found a guy on Craigslist selling a rig with all the equipment that we would need. A DSLR, like a Canon 7D camera with the different lenses, the lens kit and everything. It was like $7,500 or something at the time. So, which was probably maybe overpriced, but I was like, okay, fine, let's do it. So I bought it. And then I said, okay, what we'll do is we'll make a few short films at first and then get prepared to try to do our bigger feature projects that we were trying to plan on. So then me and Alan and another guy named Sam, one of his mutual friends that I met through him. Okay, so let's each work on a short film. With the Judges thing in particular, Alan was coming up with ideas, Sam was coming up with ideas, I was coming up with ideas. One of my ideas initially was, to keep it simple, was like four guys in business suits arguing around the table about a project that had gone bad and needed to be terminated. And in the very end, you find out that what they're talking about is the Earth, that they're like aliens or something. You know what I mean? And like a Twilight Zone thing. The point was, it was about a business deal gone bad that has to be terminated. And at the end, you find out it's the Earth. We talked about that. And then I said, well, I thought of a bunch of ideas. And Alan said, wait a second, are you going to do that one? I said, no, I don't want to do it. Do you want to do it? He said, yeah, I could expand on that or whatever. I said, okay. So I said, yeah, go ahead and do it. So Alan took that idea, crux of that idea, you know what I mean, and built into a film called Judges, which is basically about four guys that are like aliens, but they look like people. It ended up being like a 20-minute film. In hindsight, we both agreed, I think it probably should have been a little bit shorter, like maybe 10 minutes or something. For film festivals, they want you shorter the better, which we didn't really realize at that time either. It did get picked up by a film festival and it won like best music or something, best original music. Initially, Alan wanted me to be one of the guys, but at the time I felt helping do the producing and the behind the scenes production work would have been too much for me to juggle with actually partaking in the scene itself as an actor. Because there was a lot of dialogue in this thing. It's like 20 minutes of nothing but dialogue. And it just would have been kind of complicated. So we hired a different guy to do the part that I would have played. I would have played the bald guy. So that's how that kind of came about. And then we went ahead and Sam came up with another idea for some project of his. And then in my case, I suddenly discovered the Doritos thing. And suddenly, instead of doing a short film, I went ahead and made my Doritos commercials in that same time frame. Whereas you can see it on YouTube.
Oh, okay.
And I'll give you a link to where it is. And the other thing, After the Blast, that's Sam's thing. His idea for After the Blast was basically a 30-minute film about a nuclear holocaust that happens. And then there's a lone survivor guy wandering out in the wasteland. He stumbles across some sort of thing, knocks on the door, and these people open the door and they say, oh, hi, we're some survivors, come in. And it turns out that they're like, the guy says, oh, I'm the president of the United States, or whatever. And he's like, what? Oh, yeah, I used to be the Secretary of Agriculture, but now because of the way that there's no one in succession, I'm the next one. So I'm president, or something like that. Welcome aboard. And it's this weird thing where these people are like pretending to be the political leaders of the country or something. And then in the end, you find out that they're just a bunch of other survivors. But that's another one. I'll send you the link to that. So and we shot them all with my camera, the 7D and all that stuff, the lenses. But basically, they were all great learning experiences because, once again, we went through the whole process of casting and shooting and having to supply people with chairs and tables and toilets and things and food. You know what I mean? It's a complicated process to make a movie. I mean, I still try to figure out in my head, like, I know it can be scoped down a little bit more, like if I decide to do one in the future. Like I said, with a gimbal and a cell phone camera to keep it simple. But anyways, so that's how that happened.
Gotcha. So we've touched on a couple times how you had a day job after you got in the film industry and figured out, wait, I need to eat and I like to be able to pay for things. You went further into a hobby that you had of software development, of programming.
Yes.
What can you tell us about that? What did you do for a living with software?
I had an interesting career in software. I guess you could describe it as a meteoric rise suddenly. So what happens is, I started programming when I was 13 on a Commodore 64 as a little kid. And then by the time when I was 16, around 1986, I got to the point where I knew how to program. In other words, where I could think of an idea for a complex computer game and sit there and go tip, 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 and then it happens. You know what I mean? Okay. So I was making games on the Commodore. but I was still focused on like skateboarding and like movies. I wasn't thinking, hey, let's go get a computer job at 16 in 1986. You know what I mean? But I did learn assembly language back then as well. With different languages, but so I knew BASIC on a Commodore, and I knew 6502 assembly language. Right. So much so that a lot of older people in my complex where I lived at that were computer people, but they were still working back in like 70s equipment, like reel-to-reels and mainframes and those kind of older computers. So some of the stuff when I was bringing up problems, when I run into a programming problem, I did say, what's going on? I said, oh, I got this computer programming problem. We're trying to figure out this X, Y, and this math calculation and this, and they're like, it was like over or something. And eventually I would figure it out. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, suddenly go, oh, I know what the solution is. I sit there with the common. Anyway, so fast forward to in 1994, I'm like, okay, this movie thing isn't working out. I got to get a real job. Speaking of waking up at night, I used to wake up at night in a panic. In 94, I would wake up in the middle, I go, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? I got to get a job. I got to get a real job. I got to get a real career. Seriously, I would wake up like that at like 24 years old going, oh my God. I got to get a real job. Yeah. So what am I going to do? So then I said, okay, I'll focus on trying to get I said, okay, well, I know how to do programming, but I didn't know, I hadn't been to a formal college at it. So I started taking a couple of college courses, and suddenly I found myself like breezing through the programming courses, like, they were doing just such simple things.
Hello World. They were doing that.
World. Yeah, exactly. And one of them in Pascal class, because back then you would just write some code that would spit out on the monochrome thing, like on your DOS prompt or something. I go, well, how do I clear the screen? What's the command to clear the screen so I don't have to see this DOS stuff? And then the instructor was like, oh, that's too complicated for these people. You don't want to do that. I was like, it turned out to be one line. It was CLS. CLS was the command. Like, too complicated.
So you weren't showing up with no knowledge or frame of reference. You already had plenty of background. What most of the students there, they didn't have that hands-on experience that you did.
Yeah, at that point, yeah. So I only took a few classes like C and Pascal. And then by the time I was doing it, when I was in my C class, I started getting job interviews because I was sitting for jobs. And I would tell the instructor, I said, okay, I've got this job interview. And they go, okay, he would sit down with me and explain things to go over or whatever in the job interview. And I was like way ahead of those people. Not that believe me, I'm no mathematician, so I'm not any kind of 3D math guy or somebody smart with math and stuff like that. I'm not to pretend to be that. I just do basic, how to program, which is about algebra level stuff. So yeah, so then what happened was that the main key was, once again, I said, well, let me make my own computer game to learn how to do Visual Basic. I said, well, let me do Visual Basic at the time, which was a new language, Visual Basic 3. And I said, let me write my own computer game. I said, but what can I write at the time that was very simple? This is 1994. In 1994, you still had teams of dozens of people making games at that point. It wasn't like the 80s where it was just one guy anymore.
Right.
CD-ROMs had just come out in 94. Okay. So I said, maybe I could make something on CD-ROM. So I thought, okay, what's simple that people can recognize but not be copyrighted? So I said, Bible games, story of Noah, the story of whatever, nativity, you know what I mean? Those
really?
Are not copyrighted. So I said, okay, well, I can draw characters, because back then I could still draw. Now I can't draw a stick figure. But back then I could actually draw a Disney-style character. Okay, I said, how about this? I'll make Disney Does the Bible, in essence. My original idea was a story called Uncle Noah and the Animals, a computer game, which was going to be about Noah. And what happened was I had been sending in for computer jobs at the time. And suddenly some little one-man operation company in Santa Monica said, hey, come on down here, kid. Let me talk to you, kid. Whatever. So I went there, I met with this guy. His name was Tim. I'm still friends with him to this day. So this one guy said, hey, I'll help you do some contract work here. And then in talking with him, I said, I want to do this computer game about Noah. And he said, well, hey, how about we talk to some other guy? And he said, well, Christmas is coming up. Why don't you do something about Christmas? I said, okay. So I went back and I came up with an idea to do a game called The Little King, which was a story of the nativity. And I drew all the characters like Disney style. And my friend Rick, who I still work with today on project, he did the Photoshop coloring. And he taught me coloring on Photoshop. And I also taught him computer programming as well. I made this game called The Little King with little characters. Blah, 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 blah. It was all, I programmed the whole thing in BB, and it comes up like a CD-ROM game. I made it work on CD-ROM. So yeah, I said, okay, so we'll do like Disney Does the Bible. So I'll do a Christmas one, the story of the nativity with baby Jesus and all that stuff. So I said, okay, because, that's not copyrighted, so everybody knows what it is, so it's easy to sell, I thought. Okay. So I said, okay, so I made a game called The Little King, and it's the story of the nativity. And it's basically like a Disney Does the Bible kind of characters, like fun little characters, and I did the voices and stuff. It's a little simple 16-screen game, like a children's game, where you click on animals and they talk, or you come into a room and there's a game you have to, for example, when the wise men are going to go visit the baby Jesus. They bring the gold, frankincense, and myrrh. In that sequence in my game, suddenly what happens is before the wise men can go on their trip, the little monkey Ishkabibble, and I show like a little monkey suddenly appear, like an Aladdin type monkey, because I was around the Aladdin time. The little monkey Ishkabibble has hidden all the gifts. So you got to click. There's like doors and like cabinets and like a pot thing comes out of it, hides, or the cabinets open up and he looks around. So you got to like click on the different things, and then one of them has the frankincense, one of them has the myrrh, and the other one has the gold. And when you click the little thing and find it, it appears back on the shelf or something. And then when you find all three objects, you move on to the next part of the game. So little things like that. So anyway, so I made that game, put it on CD-ROM, and I was trying to still run a regular programming job. So I was sending it to different places. Now, one of the places, before I made this game, like 6 months earlier, I had sent in for a job, and it was a game company called the Dreamers Guild. And they said, hey, we don't have a job for you, but just some testing, if you want to do some game testing. So I said, okay, so I went in for like a month or two or so, just doing some testing on some of their games. They were like a 100-person company at the time. Pretty big deal at the time. They had done Inherit the Earth. They had done a game called Fairy Tale Adventure. They had done another game called I Have No Mouth, I Must Scream, with Harlan Ellison was the writer of that game. And they were doing a lot of big stuff. IBM, Microsoft were all customers there doing games. They're a pretty big little company, around 100 people. So I worked on doing some testing, and then they're like, okay, that's all we need, and see you later. And I was like, bye, you know what I mean? Thanks for everything. 6 months later, though, I made my own computer game, and I had it done on CD-ROM. And I said, okay, well, how do I sell this thing? How do I publish it? So I said, I know, let me contact that guy at the Dreamers Guild and just say, hey, I've got this computer game I finished in Visual Basic. I don't know how to publish it. This is right before kind of emails were a common thing. You right. Sent an email, but it wasn't quite as commonplace still. And I talked to him on the phone. He's like, wait a minute. He's like, you made a CD-ROM game in Visual Basic 3? He was on your own? Where I said, yeah. He goes, well, we're looking to hire a Visual Basic 3 programmer for a job we need to do or something. I was like, what? So he says, come on down. Yeah, you're going to meet this guy named Joe Pierce, and he's one of our founders. He's one of the technical leads. Okay, so I went down there and interviewed something. I had my little suit on, whatever, with the little computer game CD-ROM. And I interviewed, long story short, I interviewed with Joe, and I show him my game. It installs on his computer. It runs fine. He's like, okay, this sounds good to me. It looks fine. Looks like you know what you're doing. And by the way, Joe is also an author of D&D games. He has a company called Wormkeep Entertainment, and he's the one. I'll send you links for his. He's done like 7 D&D modules now too. Because I encouraged him to get started a few years ago. I said, yeah, just start publishing your stuff. He's like, okay. So he started publishing his own game and selling them as well. He does Kickstarter. We've used a lot of the same artists and stuff too. Joe says, okay, so let's go. We want to hire you. So, okay. So he brings me in to the big board of all the hiring guys. Now, mind you, I'm just coming now off of normal job. I was a CVS employee at the pharmacy.
Right.
I was a pharmacy technician for 3 years and like a front store guy. So I was just coming off of your basic, like everyday person job.
Retail, yeah.
Type jobs. So I mean, now suddenly I'm entering the software world. Like, okay, what do you want as your salary or whatever? And I was like, I don't know, 28,000 a year or something, some crazy number, right? And like, okay. And then they're like Joe was like, okay, well, that sounds fine. They said, even though he says you don't have a bachelor's in computer software, he says you have the equivalent in that, whatever, as far as real world knowledge from making your own game, right? So he says, so that sounds fine for us for the money. And suddenly they hired me. What happened was they had a project coming up that was due in 1 month at the time. It was due in 1 month, okay? And what it was is they needed to show a sample of a game they were doing for Viacom New Media, for MTV. It was based on a TV show called Joe's Apartment that was a short-lived MTV show, if you remember back in the early 90s, about cockroaches and bugs.
Yeah.
They said, yeah, we have a contract to do this game, but we need to come up with like a demonstration of what a possible version might look like. We need you to program that in VB because we need to get our payment of like $80,000 at the end of the month for this project. And we're like, okay. And then I'm like, okay. So then they hire me. Okay, here you go, kid. And they have this gigantic binder like this big, okay, of all this kind of concepts. But at the time, there wasn't quite a cohesive design. So over the course of like a day, I'm staring at this thing. And remember, I'm just coming in off of a normal person kind of job. Now suddenly I'm in this thing. But this is the way software works, is you're thrown into the fire like that. That goes all the way back even to like Atari days, they told me, people.
Sink or swim.
Sink or swim, basically, is what it was. So I was like, okay, well, because the designs there can get super complicated. Like they were thinking like a Lemmings or some kind of weird complicated thing
Yeah.
to be too hard to do. So I said, okay. After like a day, I said, okay, here's before him. They go, this guy is your artist. They pointed me to some artist that he'll make whatever you want him to make. This guy's your sound guy. He'll make whatever sound you want, and just go, kid.
So you weren't just programming it; you were the project head.
I just suddenly for that moment. So I just said, well, how about this? I said, here's what we can do in the time frame allowed. I said, we'll have a screen come up with like 3D characters that are designed in like a 3D, graphic, realistic characters in an apartment. And then we'll have basically just like the kids game. We'll just have certain areas that they can click on and something will kind of happen. Some animation will play or something. This is supposed to be a demo, you know what I mean, of what the game might be like. So I said, this is the best we can do in this time frame. Okay, do it. Go, kid, do it. Whatever. So, okay. So as an artist guy, you make me an apartment. I said, it's all messed up with all this shit everywhere. And sound guy, I said, I'm going to need some street sounds like cars and horns and people chattering and phones ringing and all that stuff. Okay. So I just winged it like a kid's computer game I was making before. Just said, here's the thing, click on these animations, they play and sounds play. And so I said, okay, this is the best we can do for what time. And then looked at it, okay, that's great. Let's present this to them. They went ahead and like 3 weeks later, presented it to Viacom. I said, okay, here it is. Here's one of the concepts of how it might work. Thank God it all worked fine. Like it didn't crash or anything, or it played fine. And then Viacom was like, okay, sounds cool. Here's your check for ADG or whatever. Here you go, kid. And then they're like, cool, whatever. So then they're like, okay, great job. And then they wanted me to lead the project, but it turned out that what they really ended up needing to do with that kind of game in further detail once they were planning it out better just wasn't really feasible under Visual Basic 3. Which they knew was ugly. So I said, you're really going to need to do this like Visual C. That's not quite my expertise. But said, no, you're hired on anyway. So I went along with the project. We had another thing. But ultimately, though, the problem was the project never got completed, not because of me or anything, but just because of other parts that had some issues with the business at the time with finances and things like that, that sort of had some other issues that they had to deal with at the company. But what did get released was at one point during the process, Viacom said, hey, you got any ideas for other things that we can add to this game? Like screens, like any other ideas or other kind of doodad. So I said, how about a screensaver fun pack? Like a screensaver and some anime, back then, because you'd have screensavers like,
it was a big deal.
Right, it was a big deal back then.
People loved them.
Now people are like, who cares? Yeah.
Yeah, like the pipe that just goes on forever and ever in 3D space. People used to lose their mind over that. They loved it.
Exactly, yeah.
I was one of them.
Yeah. So I said, how about a screensaver fun pack? They were like, yeah, that's a great idea, kid, or whatever. Yeah, add something like that. Make a demo of it. So I went and you know what? The demo was for E3. Remember that thing?
Yeah.
E3 that was around? Okay,
that used to be the show.
Yes, that's right. So E3 of '96 had my demo playing of the Joe's Apartment screensaver fun pack thing or whatever, and the Joe's Apartment game, which never got released. But the screensaver concept was just like a bunch of screens and crap, you know what I mean, that I had played because I had done screensavers before. They liked that. But then eventually over time, the game didn't get completed, published. But guess what suddenly they came out with out of nowhere? The Joe's Apartment screensaver fun pack. Suddenly, because there was no way that could have been done in tandem, we would have been hired to do it. Maybe not. But ultimately what happened, because they said do the demo. So I think what happened was when they realized that Viacom didn't want to complete the game or whatever, you know what I mean, for whatever reasons, all kinds of reasons these things happen. I think what they said was, well, let's go with a screensaver fun pack, which is a much easier thing to dole out the door. Yeah. And then they might have hired some other place to do it or whatever reason, some other thing. If they had already thought of that, when I said, how about a screensaver fun pack, they would have said, we're already doing that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that maybe that's where they got the idea was from that. But
they ripped you off, yeah.
Outside of that, and I bought that thing years later, by the way, just to have. So because I thought, oh, they stole the idea. Whatever.
So did you ever get the Bible games published, like out for retail sale?
So sorry. Okay, yes. So what happened was, so the bottom line was, Dreamfield hired me as a full-time software engineer at the time. That's when my career really started full-time as a software engineer, was with them. So what I did was on the side, back then, when you used to go into places like a Staples or like a Office Depot, and remember they would have a spinning rack with a bunch of cheap software stuff on it, like cheap Word programs and
like Battle Chess and things like that.
Chess, exactly. And there was a company that used to put them out called Wiz Technology all the time. So I said, hey, what about these guys? Let me contact this place. So I contacted them once again through old-fashioned means, email or telephone or something. Said I got through to the right person, and they said, okay, yeah, send in your software to us. Okay, so I sent them the CD-ROM, and then they came back to me. They're like, hey, this looks great, this little king thing. Let's make it. well, do it, kid. It's going to be this percentage and that percentage, and kid off the bottom and the gross. And the bottom line is they went ahead and did it. They published it. If you got a box, I have a box somewhere I could probably show you. But the bottom line is they published it. They probably printed maybe 10,000 units or more. I'm not sure. But mysteriously, I never saw a dime from it because of all the costs involved and all the publishing. But at least it got into the stores for a while. You know what I mean? And that was all I was happening. Because then suddenly I had a box now that said, had my game on it suddenly. And I made 2 more after that. Another children's game called The Story of the New World, The Story of Creation, Adam and Eve, and all that. And then the third one was that trivia game. I sent you the link to that one on YouTube. That was that. And then with the Dreamers Guild, though, I went on to work on a game called Fairy Tale Adventure Halls of the Dead 2. And that got released. That I worked on. It was an adventure game. And then after the Dreamers Guild, I went on to, they ended up closing shop at the end of 96. And everybody went on to other jobs. And I got hired at another computer company in Northern California. And I worked on a game there called Timeless Math 2, The Mayan Adventure. It was a game for PlayStation 1, educational game. And I worked on that there. That got released. And then after that, they went out of business because of software companies. What happens a lot of times with software companies, from what I've heard, not pointing out specific companies that I worked with, what I've heard, what happens is game companies, the way that they work is they'll take on game project A. Suddenly, you come to them and say, hey, I want to make a game based on D&D. I'm Hasbro. How much is it going to cost? It's going to cost $2 million. Great. Company B, we're Hasbro. We want to make a game based on D&D. How much is it going to cost? $1 million. Great. Company C, how much? $500,000. You got the deal. Okay, so company C goes, cool, we're making Dungeons and Dragons game. But then what happened was they underbid it. Okay? And then what happens is now suddenly company D comes along and says, hey, we're Microsoft, or we're, some big company, you know what I mean? We're Parker Brothers. We want to do this game. How much does it cost, kid? And then the problem is that they're all under budget and problem. So, but anyways, but after that, yeah. And then after that, I left the games part of the business, just went on to normal software development. But by the way, that happens in most game companies. Is usually that pattern. Nothing that's wrong with them. It's just the way it works.
And another problem is that if you have rights to like an intellectual property, those are such a mess. You're generally better off making your own IP instead of trying to license from somebody who can always jerk it away from you at the last minute, and then you're screwed. The lead time of making the game, and as the years go on, they get more and more complex, and they take more and more time and have more and more people and so much more upfront investment that sometimes you just go broke before you get to the finish line. And then if you get bought out and the new company doesn't like some projects, they'll kill them, and so on and so forth. Because like, I probably have a picture of that Joe's Apartment game you were working on, because I still have mounds of Electronic Gaming Monthly and other video game magazines from the late 80s and 90s, and they would do E3 reports. So now I'm curious to go back to look at E3. Was it 96 you said?
Yeah. Yeah, it'd be interesting to do that. I have a picture somewhere. I'll try to find that thing in 96.
That's cool. So you got into more traditional software development. Are we talking like databases, spreadsheets? What are we talking?
Okay, so real quick, the segues into, and if you thought the gaming part was kind of unbelievable, what happened there, how I kind of like was up, went up the each of the jobs kept raising the salary also. Kind of remember going from like a regular, normal retail type situation to suddenly be software engineer and doing that. So after the games, I said, it's just too unstable with a game. So I said, I had already been in Northern California at the time because I had moved from here to there to take the PlayStation job up there in San Francisco. So I was living in Walnut Creek. Northern California was a nice area. And once again, back then, all young people are like, going to be like, what the hell? I looked at a thing called the newspaper, and there was this little section that says job in there, like programming job. And because that's the way it was done back then. And I saw, hey, there's some companies around here, around my neighborhood that are like, one of them was like a mortgage broker company. And then another one was interactive voice response. Like when you call up on a phone, press 1 to do this, press 2 to do that.
Yeah.
Stuff like that with credit card payments.
Okay.
So I sent in all of them, and they all called me in for interviews. But suddenly the IVR place, oh, by the way, every time I would go on a job interview, after Dreamers Guild, when I had the little King box in my hand and the computer games I had done, when I would go on a job interview, suddenly you go, okay, so what have you done? And I go, oh, here you go. And I'd break it out to them like, what? Because suddenly now they're holding a physical product. It was very rare to be in an interview suddenly, you know what I mean? Unless you had, most software places, like, it was a plus.
Yeah.
The downside was that they'd be like, well, this isn't going to be as fun as computer games or anything. I was like, no, I don't care about that. I just wanted a regular job that's stable. Because everything was like, oh my God, they think you're going to be bored there suddenly, though. That's the downside of it. Oh, this person's going to get bored here and they're going to want to leave. Because sometimes those jobs are very repetitive.
They have no idea how boring game programming is.
Very boring. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the IVR company said, okay, we want to hire you. And then, okay, fine. And then they hired me. And what it was is I was programming systems they were a private company at the time. They would get government clients like Sacramento County traffic citations system for the courts would say, okay, we want to have a computer we can call into and people can pay their tickets. Okay, they can enter the ticket number, it'll go to the computer, come back and say, your name is SMITH, you owe $5. You want to pay with your credit card, stuff like that. So that little company would do that. They would develop that software for these kind of government entities. And they were private at the time, but we were half owned by Imperial Bank, okay, but we were still private. But Imperial Bank had invested in them for at the point I got hired in, it was 15 employees, and they had already been in business for 5, 6 years. But they were just about to start making money. They were kind of just making money, but they still needed the bank at the time, okay? So I got hired in, I developed a system for Sacramento and Idaho, Ada County, Idaho, and Boise, and some other places. And then suddenly what happened was the IRS came about and said, hey, we got a thing, we want to try a system where people can pay their taxes over the phone with their credit card. So we put in a bid for it, our company, and so did a bunch of others, including EDS, that Ross Perot's company.
Oh, Ross Perot, yeah.
They put in a bid for it too. We won it suddenly. We were like a small independent little company, right? We won the bid. And then, we're like, so suddenly they're okay, you're going to develop the IRS system, me, the IVR front end. And then the other senior guy, David, the other young programmer, was guy was at the time, you're going to develop the back end reporting system that connects to the other system and does it. Long story short, we did it. Knock on wood, it was a success. The project was a super success, in spite of a huge potential issue, because we were used to developing these IVR systems, no problem. Inside of an IVR, though, was a modem, like an old-fashioned modem, because it's back in the 90s. And that's how it would dial out for a credit card charge. Okay, so you dial out to the credit card, all that stuff, fine, right? No problem. The thing was, the way our company made money was, so when you pay your parking ticket real quick, we would say, okay, there's going to be a $10 convenience fee on top of that. So we'll put those two numbers together, charge you one time, and then they would work it out in the back end with the client. Okay. IRS said, no, we need to have two separate transactions happen. One for the person for the IRS payment, and the separate one is on your thing with the convenience fee, because we don't want people to get confused. So we're like, okay, no problem. So I had to suddenly go in and re-engineer the main software to suddenly handle this new system, which we hadn't really tried before, to suddenly have to send two different transactions through with the thing. It was complicated. It was a modem, back then. Anyways, thank God it all worked out fine. Everything worked out. It was a success. And then guess what happened? Suddenly Imperial Bank said, okay, we're going to take you guys public. We're going to put you an IPO. And we're like, what? Okay. Suddenly we go into an $80 million IPO situation. Suddenly me and all the other everybody at the company suddenly got stock, in the company for the thing, all the stuff. Yeah, it was great. And then suddenly they brought in a new guy to be the CEO, because our current owner at the time, president, was just a normal dude. He had a kidney transplant. He wasn't up to. What happens is when a bank takes over like that to push you into an IPO, sometimes they'll keep the main person on if they're younger and stuff. But in this case, they wanted to go with another guy who was more of an experienced, like a world-class CEO type guy, like a Trump or, some kind of guy on those levels, right?
Wow.
Yeah, so they put out a thing where they're looking for people to hire, and they end up finding this guy. He used to be the CEO of GeoCities, and he sold GeoCities to Yahoo for $4.5 billion at the time, right before us. And then he came on to us. He became our CEO. His name was Thomas R. Evans. He came on to be our CEO suddenly to drive us through the going public thing. So we went to an $80 million IPO suddenly. We all suddenly had six-figure salaries. We all had stock suddenly. We went from a little 15-person company to suddenly in the span of a year and a half to lead like 300 people or some crazy thing or something like that suddenly. And including offices suddenly on the East Coast, because we were only focused on the West Coast. Yep. So they built offices on the East Coast where the CEO guy was located, wink smiley face, of course. And then what happens with this, they bring their own wrecking crew on board now. He brings all his people to be the CIO, the CFO, brings in a whole wrecking crew. And then, well, I got to be careful about what I start to say.
Did they keep you around or did they sweep you out?
I was kept around. I left voluntarily. I should have stayed because I suddenly wanted to go back to LA because I was in Northern California. I was there from 1997 to 2001. Okay. But it turned out okay because I had like stock that was worth like a small $2.5 million, okay, which is a good number. Right?
Nice.
Compared to those guys that suddenly had like 800 million shares or some crazy number. They didn't even build the company. You know what I mean?
Just give me $2.5 million. I won't complain. I promise you.
That was fine with me. The problem is, yes, the problem is that when you're under those things, you can't just grab the money and leave. You're under vesting period. Okay, so you have to stay for like 3 years, 2 years, 1 year, and then after each year, more and more is vested something, so you can cash out. So it turned out, though, when I left, I was able to come out with a much significantly smaller amount than that. But the bottom was we were underwater because they had missed the first quarter earnings. They had said, we project we're going to make this much money, and they didn't. You know, we kind of had warned them a little bit about that. But at the time, they're like, no, we think we're going to do it. And they missed it. So that caused the stock to drop. Because it was up to $58 a share. And some of my cheap stock was $1.25 from $50. So anyways, so yada, yada, yada. So, but that was great. I still know a guy that's still there. There's like one guy left that's still there working there. But they all lost their stock. What ended up happening was the stock dropped so far. The only guys that cashed in were the CEO and all those. They sold the company to another company. And then that company did not issue stock. And then that company got bought out by another company. And they're currently run by that company right now. So they're still around as we speak. In fact, that's who I worked for back in 2011. They had rehired me back in 2011 to work on some of the very same software that I had written back in 1997. But yeah, so once again, up the thing. And then from there, I just went on to other software places doing the same thing. Okay. Internet, other stuff, Windows stuff. I did a big project for Warner Brothers. I sent you a link to that. You can check it out later for Warner Brothers Consumer Products Division.
Oh, that thing. Okay, gotcha.
Oh, yeah. Back in 2008, 2010 with Alan, by the way. That's where I met Alan.
Gotcha. That's something. And well, isn't that funny how the CEO, the experienced big finance guy, somehow he came out on top, right, and all of his friends did. And then they just swap around companies where they do the same thing, and your stock not worth as much as his stock when he cashed it. Oh yeah, that's a tale as old as investment banking, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it gets even better because when they missed the first quarter earnings, I won't mention names, but one of those top people that was in charge of that, not the CEO, but when they missed that first quarter earnings and the stock tanked, they had a big meeting. CEO guy comes in and he's like, okay, our stock dropped because we missed the first quarter earnings. He goes, there's two people responsible for that. He said himself, and we'll just say Mr. ABC. And Mr. ABC is no longer with the company.
Okay.
He got paid a $20 million golden parachute.
Why can't somebody fire me and give me $20 million to leave? That'd be great. You know, I'll do it for 10. I'll do it for 10. You're talking about the bidding process. 10. Yeah. Okay, 5. I'll do 5. Just
right. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, so, that's funny. Oh man. So
yeah. If you'd only been there for 6 months.
Lovely.
So anyway, yeah. And then when we brought up questions about this, they just said, sorry, kid, that's the way it works. Basically, that's what they told us. You know what I mean? This is just how it works level.
These are the rules that we've written. You're going to live with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds right. Wow. So it looks like you have a history of game design even before you touched Dark Wizard games and got into the RPG industry. Had you been playing D&D this whole time up until you actually got started making the stuff, or had you dropped off for a bit?
I had dropped off because I had stopped playing maybe around 1991 or 2 or somewhere around that time, and I kind of had dropped out. And then, but I still always was interested in it. I would still try to follow the news about it, and I still kept all my books and everything. You know what I mean? And I still had the kind of the passion for that subject matter. I just hadn't been playing it. And then it wasn't until around 2003, one of my girlfriends at the time, I stopped at a hobby store, and suddenly I saw the Goodman games like Dungeon Crawl Classics or whatever thing. And I was like, with a yellow stripe. I was like, what? What the hell is this? Whatever. What do you mean? What? You can make it an adventure like this again? Huh? How? And then I bought it. And I was all excited to read it. And I read it, and I was like, it was just kind of boring, whatever it was. You know what I mean? It looked like it was going to be more exciting than it was.
Yeah.
Maybe I missed something. Maybe I missed it, so I reread it again or something. It was like,
I don't think you did.
something. But anyways, I felt that it didn't live up to its cover hype. So
Yes.
on the cover. I all remember when the modules were 20 levels deep and there was NPCs would be killed. And that's how I wrote my thing, was still similar to that one. But in mine, I feel like I actually follow through with it. But anyways,
so was your inspiration for getting into actually making and publishing adventures? Was it looking at that product, seeing how unsatisfactory it was and saying, I can do better? Or was it some whole other inspiration?
That's a good question. So I don't know. It was just something. Well, that too, I felt, well, that wasn't very good or something, or that wasn't very exciting, I felt. But I liked what they were, the concept of doing a retro module and then kind of talking about it in that third person. Like, remember when there was the NPC kill, all the stuff that we were used to. So that's probably what kind of planted the seed there, because that was around the time, like I said, when I was starting to think about that. Okay, well, if you can do this, maybe I can do one. And I started to try to do one. I wrote two. One was like a monster manual thing, and the other one was like an adventure. But at the time, this was 2004, when I was just using Microsoft Word. I wasn't using the right program. I was just using clip art off of the internet, like the Renaissance picture that doesn't make any sense. And the map, I think, was very primitive. It just didn't look right. I made every single mistake in the book. Not an interesting story, not a proper title. I didn't have the yellow stripe thing. I tried to do something different, more like the ones that came out after the yellow stripe, where they had the stripe at the top or something.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Second edition ones or something. Is that what those are? It just didn't look right. And this wasn't right at all, actually. Although some of the monsters that I wrote in that monster book ended up making it into my Monsters of Mayhem book, but as refined and done better with professional art. So that's how I suddenly said, okay, let me try to do one. And I tried back then for that, and it was a failure because I didn't try to sell it even. I didn't go as far as to selling it. Drive-through RPG was around, but I just felt this is not professional looking. So I threw in the towel with that and then just kind of forgot about it. But I still would keep modules. I still kept buying retro modules. I bought all the Goodman Games modules. I bought all the way up to like number 50 or something, I think. Those Goodman Games classic. So I still kept in that scene. I'd search for eBay for retro modules. I'd find some obscure one. Because you know how it is. Like generally one guy writes one at some point and maybe it sells a little bit, but then he gives up on it or something. Or maybe if they're lucky, they make two. There's a few guys now that R. Nelson Bailey, he's doing really well. He's got like 10 books now, I think. He's coming up on 10 maybe or so. He does the Dungeon Delve series. So he's doing well. And I know Kevin Watson made up like 5 so far or something, 5 modules. So around 2012, when I discovered Kickstarter, I said, hey, maybe I can make a module again, only this time I'll hire professional artists and map makers and people like Alan that are professional layout people. Because when Alan and I were doing the software project for Warner Brothers, I had also developed my own social network at the time. I had literally programmed a social network just like Facebook, only it wasn't called Facebook. It was called Upcrowd, which is a stupid name, but it was the only name we had. Bottom line is a social network. Make profiles, make pages.
Right.
It was, think of a combination between MySpace and Facebook at the time, where you could actually have your profile, but then you could make a page like in Facebook, but you could trick it all out like with graphic and stuff like MySpace.
Like MySpace.
Gotcha. So I knew Alan knew how to make books because we had made a book for like an investment plan back then. So I said, hey, Alan, I'm going to make this book, this D&D module. Can you do the layout? He's like, yeah, we can do that. And I went on to Kickstarter and I started backing people's projects. That's how I found people like Brian McCraney and Alyssa Faden to do maps. And I found all the people that I would need to do with the professional part. So I said, okay, let's try to do this. And then I launched the first Kickstarter. And because I had money from the computer job, I was able to hire Jeff D to do my cover. So I knew at least I'd have the cover done, and I knew what it would look like as far as that. And that's how I started with that one, raised the money on Kickstarter.
And yeah, I still insist that that's probably the best collection of art in a module I've seen. So the sense I'm getting is that you got into the RPG design and publishing industry because it was something that you enjoyed. Now you just wanted to do more with it. Am I reading that right?
Yes. Let's just say there was some kind of calling or something. You know what I mean? I always liked those modules from the 80s, even though I hadn't played since then. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I always kept them. It was just something about them, something to do with maybe the look and feel or the notion of each one being a unique story or something. I don't know how to explain it. Just some sort of calling or something. You know what I mean?
They were compelling. And I've been reading and reviewing some of the originals just within the past few years, and they're still good. they are still standard bearers of quality. And that's one of the things that impresses me about the original writers like Gary Gygax, Alan Hammock, and so on and so forth. When they got started in making these products, these modules, they were already so good at it. Like usually people screw up a lot before they get it right. And kind of like what you said with your first module, it was a great learning experience, wasn't it?
It was. And even in Coffins, there's a lot of mistakes that I need to fix, but go ahead. But yes, but definitely the first one was nothing but trouble.
Right. And so that, was it Against the Steading of the Hill Giant Chief and the entire Giant series, you could pick that up and play it today, and there's still depth to it, but he uses so few words to get across so much adventure potential. I mean, it's just amazing. Like, how do you start off with some of the best that will ever be made? I'm very impressed. And so the fact that you're adding your own contribution to the corpus of RPG modules, love it.
Thank you so much. And it's a privilege and an honor to be able to do this to the extent that I'm even able to do it. I mean, I'm only surviving off this based on the small group of people that like my work, apparently enough to keep wanting to buy it. And I keep trying to make sure everything I do is always done to the best I can do, even though now I'm outputting a lot more. Before I used to only be able to put out one module per year when Alan and I were doing some of the first works on this stuff. We were only able to get like one thing out a year. Now I'm getting out like almost 10 to 14 or more per year between their 5e counterparts and their first edition version. So it's quite unbelievable, but I'm getting better at it. And as I do that, I'm able to keep the quality up and keep it going for as long as I can, I guess. I mean, as long as I have stories and ideas. A friend of mine had said, well, you should just keep it maybe 12 modules. I was like, well, why would we want to limit it to just 12? And then the response was, well, does anybody care about Goodman Games number 62 or something? Which is a funny response to have. That very good friend of mine. But I was like, well, let's keep going until I run out of ideas or something. You know what I mean? Or whatever.
Yeah. Go until you're done.
Yeah, go until you're done. It's like a TV show. You know what I mean? You want to keep going as far as you can take it. Like Seinfeld, they got out in their 9th year at whatever 200 episodes, whatever the hell it was. They're at the top of their game. They were at the top of their game when they stopped because they were worried about starting to fall. Less quality. Got like 50 titles on the list so far, but I'm just going through every one. Like, okay, this one will be next, and like the stuff. So just keep going through it, and then I keep thinking of new titles and new concepts, especially for the post-apocalyptic stuff too. That's a whole other list. I've got like 20 things on that one. Yeah, so I'm lucky and blessed that I'm able to do this. So I think it's the economy right now is in a tough spot because each one of my latest books, they should be doing better. You know what I mean on the Kickstarters, but I think it's just the economy right now.
I saw a news headline just earlier today that 50% of people polled would go on a summer vacation if the economy wasn't so bad and they weren't so broke. In the movie theaters, there's quite a few good movies that have come out and they've disappointed. Well, why have they disappointed? Well, when money's tight, it's this kind of stuff that is the first to go.
Right, exactly. And that's a good point too with the movies. Because I'm pretty confident, like you said, the economy, because like in 2018, like Dragon's Princess did like 16,000. That was just one book, so one ebook. And then they've been doing well, but then suddenly the last few years, boom, with the thing, they kind of dropped. In other words, books that should be doing like that, 16 or so, are doing like way less, like 10 or something, or 9. This is not quite as much. I'm blessed with whatever I have. The problem is trying to do it like a full-time business. It has to make money at some point. You know what I mean? Otherwise, I don't mean to complain. I'm just saying, I think that overall, things would be much better for all of us, industry, if the economy was a little bit better. So.
Yeah. If we had like that 2019 economy. Yeah,
right.
Awesome.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. Even some of my friends are saying that, like some of my artist friends are saying, I'm just not getting booked as often now. This year has been bad. And once again, just people aren't spending the money.
Interesting. But you've done how many Kickstarters?
20 as of now. The current one is 20. Knock on wood, they were all each successful. So none of them ever failed or had a misfire. Thank God.
And that's impressive. What's your secret?
Just do whatever you can to complete it. I mean, just don't ever give up. I mean, I've fallen behind years ago. I would fall behind sometimes, but it was only by maybe 3 to 6 months tops. But we would always end up delivering the product. That's the problem is I think people get into it and they just don't realize how complicated it is to do something. I mean, I might make it look easy or something because I've done like 20 of them now. If it looks easy or something, it's only because somehow I'm just so used to doing it. Now I have a whole process, but when in the beginning it was, oh my God, I got to get this book done. I didn't never think it would go beyond one book, back in the time when I did the first Kickstarter. But it was only because people kept saying, hey, make another one. And I was like, after Coffins, I was like, make another one. But how the hell am I going to do that? I already do the kitchen sink in the coffin. What more is there? What literally? I was like, what else is there? So then I said, okay, with Star Spawn, and at that point, then Undercity. Then I started realizing, okay, well, let me take a spin off of maybe an old title and put a new spin on it to make a new story, and maybe take an original idea like Thing or like Princess or Dwarven King. Then I started realizing, okay, well, what wasn't done back in the day? So in other words, in the Yellow Stripe module time, I don't remember there being any specific Dwarven adventure. So that's why I said that I said, let's make a Dwarven adventure. I said, you can do the lead writing on it. I'll be the co-writer. I said, but they'll have a Minecart shaft thing, and we'll call it like the world's greatest Dwarven adventure or something. Instead, we settled on, I said, well, it's better we call it Vault of the Dwarven King. This way we get Vault of the Drow, Vault of the Dwarven King. It sounds like an old module. It sounds familiar to people. But yet my point was, make something that they didn't make back then. They never had a Dwarven adventure that I was aware of that was a Yellow Stripe. Same thing, like I don't remember anyone would ever have a dragon involved, a Yellow Stripe specifically. That's why I made Dragon's Princess. I took Palace of the Silver Princess kind of concept and then added the dragon thing in it, because there was no Yellow Stripe that had some dragon main boss villain ever that I remember for Yellow Stripe modules.
Same here.
Dragonlance, you know what I mean? I'm talking Yellow Stripe. So that was the other thing was, okay, well, I'll take some new ideas that they didn't do back then and we'll make stories off of that. And now it's, as I said, it doesn't stop. I got so many on the list. Like I said, even the current one, the Arrow Lotus one, I said to him, I go, well, one option is just make whatever you're inspired to make, and I'll just write a module around it. And he's like, okay, because I just got this idea when you said that. That's the thing, and there'll be this creature and this thing and these people and this thing. And I said, go, let's just do it.
Yeah,
and
Arrow Lotus.
Okay. Yeah, and then he did the picture, the painting, and he showed me like a very rough sketch. The rough was so rough it was hard to even interpret what it was, other than kind of object in places, you know what I mean? And I said, okay, great, go do it. And then, yeah, he did it. It took about a month or so, which is fine. There's no rush. And I said, I'll write the module around it. And he came up with that picture. That's really amazing. I said, okay. So it took a couple of days. I thought about it, kept knocking ideas around, and finally came up with the idea that would revolve around that kind of character, that creature thing. And it was kind of a whimsical, fun creature. So I thought, okay, maybe this creature will be like the outcast of this world. This world is now being invaded by these bad things. And because he's been sort of the outcast on the sidelines, he was able to escape the control. And now when he runs into player characters, he can explain the situation, and they can now help him go on his hero's journey in a way. Suddenly, that he's the unlikely hero now that has to save his people or his land.
What's the name of that module?
It's called Fantastic Quest of the Whimsical One. And then in tandem with that, I'm doing another one called Lost Tomb of the Mummy Lich. There's another module that's a Tomb of Horrors type thing, only with an Egyptian mummy thing. Two together is because that kind of helps guarantee that we'll get the dollars up there to be in the 15 to 20 range for the Kickstarter, which is ultimately, in order to do, like I said, we have to talk the reality of business and money, you know what I mean?
Right.
They have to take a certain amount at some point, otherwise I can't run it properly. But the point is that that's why I did kind of two of them together. If I had my way, I'd just do one singular Kickstarter module. But by putting two together, you help guarantee that the numbers are going to get up, at least in this economy.
So it seems like your brand consists of get a familiar and catchy title and pack it full of entertaining things to do and deliver in a timely manner. Is that about right?
Correct, yes.
What's not to like?
Exactly. You try to make interesting characters that are either the heroes or the villains of the story. And even when they're the villains, give them kind of an interesting backstory and stuff to do with all that. I kind of think of like all of us modern writers, creators in the industry for this stuff, we have the benefit of this magical thing called hindsight. So we can look back on the old modules or old movies or whatever we're trying to create, and we can see now, okay, well, the mistakes that they made. Here's the things that were great about it, but here's the things that they made mistakes. And then when we're going to make a new product, make new mistakes, like people like to point out in mine, with grammar issues or stat issues. Or
I think you should be pointing this way, because I think I've said those things. Yeah, go.
No, not just you. Everybody has pointed out, and it's true. But that's what makes them unique, or so. That's what makes them special. Something. That's what shows that it was my genius, or something.
Clearly, Mark Taormino product. Oh, and how did I leave out compelling art? Always.
Oh yes.
Art always, somewhere in there.
Yes, I always try to have the best artists that I can do this stuff. Because remember, before it would take us a year just to do one book. But that was mainly because I was taking care of my mom and I couldn't quite focus on it. But God forbid, now she had passed away last year, gave me free time now to focus on the business of home. So in doing so, now I can literally come up. Borderlands was done, Village of the Borderlands, a 64-page module with all that artwork and map. I did that in like a span of 3 months. In fact, in the middle of that campaign, I also suddenly spit out the recipes book. because that recipes thing was only supposed to be 2 pages. It was only supposed to be 2 recipes for the PDF. But I thought, hey, this is pretty neat. Maybe I can make a whole book out of it. And that's why I said, okay. And then I was dating this lady at the time named Marsha. And I said, hey, you can help. She said, I'll help. I'll do the recipes. So she helped do the recipes. And I put her the story as she's the wine lady in the Borderlands book. She's a wine lady with dogs. So I can do them now fairly quickly. You know what I mean? Especially if they're more truncated down to 32 pages, like Jester was 36. A normal one now, Legend of the Demons was 24. So I'm going to try to keep them in that range now between 24 to 36 pages. Because beyond 36, other than Borderlands, it just gets to be too big. I don't think people have that much of attention span to play for 2 or 3 weekends, 4 weekends, you know what I mean? And that big of a module anymore.
Yeah, you make a great point. Because so what if you've got a 1,000-page module epic mega campaign? How far are you going to get through it? In the groups I've been in, you don't have the best luck with that. I imagine a lot of people have a similar experience. And yeah, but you can make smaller adventures, make them interesting, and then just string them together. Bam, you got your campaign.
Exactly. And it's much faster for me to be able to do them a little bit smaller. It's more cost effective also. A lot of these things are also financially based. We're trying to make it work financially. You know what I mean? So I have to worry about costs, but hopefully I can keep plate spinning and keep doing this because, yeah, I'm happy to do it. I enjoy making them for everybody, even though I don't get to play them really. I mean, I make them and give them to testers to test. Even I don't get to play them, the other people get to play them. You know what I mean? Because I'm really writing them the way I would play the module, the way I write it, which is why maybe it sounds strange sometimes. Like, from a first-person standpoint, that might not make sense in a box text. Point is that I'm happy just writing them to make it so other people can enjoy playing. So
the first time I heard about Dark Wizard's games was on Captain Courageous's YouTube channel. I've been watching him for a long time. What made you pick the name Dark Wizard Games?
Great question. I decided finally on Dark Wizard Games around 2018. I started publishing games though around 2013, and I hadn't come up with the Dark Wizard name yet. What I had was Max and Mayhem Dungeons, which is really more of a product brand versus the company name, okay? So I had Max and Mayhem Dungeons was the main name at the time. If you look at the very first printings of those very first Vampire Queen, actually, the very first name on Vampire Queen was a small company I had invented called, is a bad name, Freak Show Game, which I hated that name, but I needed a name. So long when I'm dead, 100 years from now, if anybody cares about this modules, if you have a module for Vampire Queen that has the word Freak Show Games on it, that is the very first printing ever of those very first 100 prints. Because after that, I changed it to be Max and Mayhem Dungeons. And then after a few years, I was like, that's just too long. That's the brand. And around 2018, I came up with Dark Wizard Games with the notion being, okay, I wanted to have the wizard like TSR, like a rustic looking wizard. And then in the logo, Dark Wizard, the words will look like the Dark Horse font. And I told this to Alan. I said, because Alan was also doing the graphic design. He did the map. And he did sometimes a lot of the art direction stuff, depending on which modules it was. I did the main overall, artist make this picture, artist make that picture. And then he would also dictate to them what to do with, depending on if it was one of his projects that he was working on mainly, or some of the other corrections that would need to be done. But otherwise, also he did the design work well, doing the layout. But the point is that with the artwork, yes, always try to have the top.
Now, do you have a regular gaming group?
No, I don't. Just because, exactly. Just I don't have a home game group. Primarily because for the majority of the last 8 years, I was taking care of my mom, so I really had no time for anything. However, she passed away early last year, so hopefully going forward, maybe I can get involved with another gaming group or something like that.
Doesn't Joe Manganiello know about your adventures? Don't y'all live in the same area? He could invite you over.
Who was that?
Joe Manganiello?
Yeah, probably.
He has made himself into a D&D celebrity. He goes to Gary Con a lot, hangs out with Luke Gygax all the time. And
what was the name again? Joe
Manganiello.
Is that the actor guy or?
The actor guy, yeah.
That's what I thought. Okay, interesting.
Yeah, and his evil paladin has shown up in 2 Wizards of the Coast products at this point.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, send him a copy of your adventure, see if he wants to game.
Yeah, I'll send him a copy of all the adventures. Yeah, I think that would be good.
I got you.
Even though I don't game, when I write the modules, that's like I'm DMing. You know what I mean? When I come up with the ideas or the things to throw at the players, that's be the sort of the way I would do it if I was DMing a game.
I got you. So when you do play, what's your favorite class?
Okay, my favorite class was always playing the thief or the monk or magic user. Yeah, those were my favorites. Yeah. What about you?
AD&D 2nd edition Psionic, that's my bag, baby.
Oh, okay, okay.
Yeah.
And did you have to roll the double zeros or something for the Bionic, right?
No, that's in first edition AD&D. Second edition AD&D, you can just be the class. You got to meet the stat prerequisites, but you could just play it and you're fine.
Okay, yeah, because in the Hell module I wrote,
Yeah,
it says
I
something
saw that.
about, yeah, you know about that with your psionics and your double zero roll or something, that you rolled it or something. Because we used to have a guy, we were teenagers, there was an older guy in his 40s who played D&D with us, and he would just kind of sit there in the corner just like rolling dice, like we're doing our thing, where you hear dice rolling. He goes, got it, got it. He goes, I got psionics. Okay, everybody, look, I got psionics. I got it. I rolled 0-0. Anyway,
I got 6 to 18s in a row, and
yeah,
on my strength, somehow I got the 18, 100, and I got a double aught on the psionics roll. Of course,
right.
those guys, yeah, you can't trust them.
Right. But I would say about in the process of creating modules, if there's people out there that want to create modules, they want to do it, they should do it. Try to do it. If you really want to do it, you know what I mean, to the commercially, then it's impossible.
Get
But
out
it's
and
just
prove yourself. Yeah.
start to do it though, it's tricky though with all the stuff. I might make it look easy, but just because I'm used to the process.
Yeah,
So,
you've got the battle rhythm down. You know how to make it all work. That's a learning curve.
right. Well, what freaks me out is that we're all living in such a modern time with technology that somehow over the last 10 years, showing between modern technology and the time we live in, independent creators like us are able to suddenly output products, but would take like a full company like TSR or something with a whole army of people. You know what I mean? Working in like an office going, shit, we got to get this done. Hurry, get this done. And it's just so funny how technology and remote contractors are in such a way now that you can run that kind of a small business, yet do it from a virtual array of folks. Anyways, it just freaks out or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But my original intent was to try to get to a point where, like the old days, how often did modules used to come out? I forget because I was like 13 or something in 1983.
Depends on the era.
Once every couple months, like back in 1983 or something, or 1980.
That seems right.
Actually, I started playing in 1980, really. I was like 10 years old or something. I remember we would go like a game store, right? Or some kind of comic shop or a game store or something. And they'd be like on the shelf, like in shrink wrap. Yeah, but I remember they would come out routinely. So I'm trying to strive to get to that point where every few months now I'm releasing at least 1 or 2 books. You know, sort of like the old days where you can rely on something new was coming out.
That was quite a production schedule for one dude. So, what is your favorite module that you did not write?
Okay, I would say the Ghost Tower is always my go-to favorite. I do really like White Plume Mountain a lot. I would say White Plume Mountain maybe as far as broadness of the funhouse style concept of. Whereas Inverness is shown as a funhouse dungeon, but not quite as much as, you know, when you start to really think about it. There's only a few encounters once you get into the tower where suddenly it's completely different. The Medusa thing is one whole kind of concept. And there's the water level, which is underwater. Those are kind of where you start to get to extreme fun housey kinds of concepts. But the main dungeon encounters aren't really that. They're just kind of, you know, regular monsters. So my point is, as far as funhouse dungeons go, I would say maybe White Plume Mountain. But Ghost Tower was always my #1 favorite. That's why it would inspire me to write. And that's why Coffins is bred.
Cool. Now, what is your favorite module that you did write? Pick between your babies.
yeah. It's hard to pick, but I would definitely say Funhouse Dungeon, the Puppet Jester one, between the backstory of that character being kind of complex and the encounters stuff of all the encounters being unique and fairly interesting, done funhousey effect. I would consider that one of my favorite one. And then second favorite would be my Dragon's Princess book, which was more of a role-playing experience versus a funhouse, because once again it has a breadth of backstory characters in that. Especially Dragon's Princess has a lot of very Alan used to tease me all the time when I was writing Dragon's Princess because he would say Tennessee Taormino, like Tennessee Williams. Like kept going on and on with the backstory of the characters. But speaking of on and on with backstories, in the Legend of Seven Golden Demons, in the sloth level of hell, the sloth creatures tell characters, just please entertain me with your 18-page backstory of your character. I need to go to sleep. Would her please villain me? So then the characters start telling them their backstories, and then the DM has to roll dice to determine if the player characters are falling asleep listening to it, and then if the monster finally falls. But my personal favorites would be Funhouse Dungeon and Dragon's Princess, but I like them all, of course. I think they're all very unique and interesting, even all of them, really. But those are 2 favorites.
Well, good deal. Now, what have you learned about the RPG industry since you became a creator that you didn't know before?
It's a good question. I guess I didn't realize it was such kind of a more smaller community than we had thought or something. I thought it was more bigger or something. I didn't realize at this point it's kind of more of a smaller community or something of creators, whatever. And I don't ever think that one of those larger companies would ever say, "Hey, let's hire that Taormino guy to make our event." I'm not quite sure if my particular style or niche of the way I do the things would ever be appealing to that. And I don't know about that, but either way. So in other words, I think as far as where I fit in with the current thing is just in exactly where an independent publisher. But I definitely would like to go to some of the events and things like that at some point. What are the biggest conventions to go to? Gary
Well, conventions. You got, of course, if you want the big cattle call, you got Gen Con, where they basically take over Indianapolis every year. I personally wouldn't want something like that because you're a number amongst thousands and thousands of people. Now, if you're trying to sell product, that might be a good place to go. If you're trying to interact with other designers and play interesting games and do a lot of play tests and get great feedback, North Texas role-playing game convention in Dallas, that's a well-kept secret, and it's a smaller con, but they keep it small intentionally because they don't want it getting overrun and ruined. They want to keep the gaming experience tight and excellent. I've been going for the past 3 years, and a friend of mine that I used to game with in New Hampshire just came down and joined me at North Texas in June. And it was so good that he went ahead and bought his ticket for next year as well.
What does it cost for a ticket?
$100.
Oh, okay, that's not bad. Okay.
If you run a sufficient number of games, then they comp you the ticket.
And I saw your video too. That was from the North Texas, right? The new video that came out.
Yeah, that's the one.
I watched that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So if you want to interact with great luminaries and current hot designers, that's the place to go. And heck, they might qualify you as a special guest and pay for some of your costs. I mean, you're kind of a deal.
Once again, I don't even think of it that way, but yeah, I'm glad that people like my work enough then to feel that way. Because I just think I'm just some guy here going, "Oh my God, I gotta pay the rent. What's the next book to come out? Okay, this one. Okay, great. Let's do this one now." And then hope that it makes some money,
Yeah.
So, but that's great to hear. I appreciate that. I'm thankful that people like the work. As long as I don't go broke, so people keep buying the stuff. If you like it, go to my website and keep supporting it. But I always want to do it. It's like a dream come true. And I'm just like, I'm fortunate to just be able to come up with these projects so far, knock on wood, that they seem to have interesting stories and characters. I think that's one of the differences that maybe with my stuff that's different than, the other modules that are put out there is where I have more of these kind of detailed backstories of the villains and things like that make them kind of interesting or unique kind of characters to play or to engage with or whatever. Things like that is maybe what makes my stuff different. I don't know.
And that was one of the questions I was going to ask you about was, do you ever go to any cons? So yeah, I'd encourage you to get out and mix it up some. Another one that I want to go check out that I've heard great things about is Game Hole in Wisconsin. Supposedly a really good spot to go to as well. I might do it next year. We'll find out.
Do they usually have like a hotel connected to the place or a hotel nearby or something on these conventions?
For most gaming conventions, yeah. It usually has a con hotel, and some of the hotels have other hotels next to them, and then you meet at the convention space to do the actual gaming, and that's how it goes.
Okay, because the only one I had attended recently was like back in 2018. It was called LostCon out here in California, so LostCon 44, and I was on a panel, a small panel with a couple other people from the Dreamers Guild and some going over some stuff. So yeah, definitely I want to start checking out the other. And I just need to make, once again, keep going to the website because the more that comes in, then the more I can potentially get to those kind of things.
Yeah, and if you're not sure, if you've never read any of Mark's stuff and you're not sure if you like it or not, go sign up on his mailing list because he'll give you 2 free modules. I mean, 2 whole modules for you to just enjoy, and then you can find out for sure if that's something you want to support with your money or not.
That's a good point. Yeah, they can do that.
So last question I got about the role-playing game industry before we move on to more standard questions that I give to every guest is, what do you think of the current state of D&D? And by D&D, I mean the thing that Hasbro owns.
Right. Okay. So, I'm 54 and I grew up with the first edition stuff. So I'm kind of because I grew up and played that up until the end of kind of playing. I haven't played any of the other stuff really, second edition, third edition, really fifth edition stuff per se. My head is still always wired in that first edition mentality, gaming style and play. Now, I understand that, of course, over the years, the sensibilities change or things like that. I do offer 5th edition versions of some of my modules, so I learned the kind of bare minimums of 5e to put it simple enough to do a conversion for some of the books for folks that like that. But I'm still more attracted to 1st edition style play than kind of modern D&D, like the modern 5e stuff. Although because I do conversions of my stories for other people that enjoy that. But just me personally, I still always prefer the 1st edition style of play and look and feel for that matter. But I do think that the 5th edition stuff, some of the stuff I've done with 5th edition is very nice. I did nice artwork. I like some, like the Sewer Witch 5e book. Very well done by Justin Davis. He did a very nice cover for it, all full page. Looks like sort of a modern D&D cover. It looks almost like a Wizard of Oz style thing with the young girl and like the witch or something. Very, very well done. So that's about it as far as that. As far as choices of some of the adventures and styles that they're coming out with, it's just not my particular cup of tea per se. I don't know. I think there's a thing right now with the orcs trying to make orcs good or something like that, which only makes me want to make a module that will be coming out soon, by the way, where the orcs are evil. They're bad, and they're green, and they're orcs, they're monsters. So I'm going to work on something like that as well coming up here very soon, where the orcs, they're green monsters, and they're not anything other than monsters that are fictional monsters.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't know that the 5e or the current Hasbro stuff that they're putting out is designed for us, because I appreciate the older school sensibilities of earning what you get, of having to resource manage, of having to struggle, because it's only by struggling do you become a hero. You don't just effortlessly walk up and Mary Sue your way into being a hero. Those stories suck. And you could have crappy stats, but if you play smart and you succeed enough, you become a hero. And that's more of an everyman story to me. And I found out earlier today that the kind of time that while you're writing Hanging Coffins, the Vampire Queen, and Legend of the Seven Golden Demons and stuff like that, they put out an adventure on D&D Beyond where you play a barista making coffee for
that's
people.
what that picture's about.
What the hell?
Oh, that's the one with the two guys with the beard tattoos or something. The
That's
weird thing,
different,
right?
friend.
Oh, okay, that's
That's
the same thing. Okay.
the gay dwarves eating hot cross
Okay, I
buns.
thought that was the barista because they're holding like some muffins or some kind of thing or some plate of food.
Yeah, that's in the
So that's a whole
2024
other adventure. We're going to say that's another
PHB.
adventure that they're right. I mean, I don't understand quite what the audience is for that. As far as I guess the way we grew up playing D&D was you make a character, they start out first level, you go into the dungeon, a bunch of goblins show up suddenly and kill you, or you kill them.
Yep.
Take the treasure, move on to the next room where it's a bunch of skeletons coming out attacking you. Roll dice and have fun, get treasure and gain levels. Right? Okay. Crazy thing happens where you roll a 20 and you knock the skeleton's head off or something.
Yeah.
Something like that.
You achieve
I
something.
don't know. Yeah, from what I've heard about a lot of these modern 5th edition stuff, it's more of storytelling or something. Like my older brother, played a session with his younger son of 5th edition. And for like 3 hours online, he said it was nothing but other people just talking about the characters. And then at the very end, in the last 2 minutes, they fought some monsters or something, and it was all over with. But he said it was more about talking about their characters than playing. So I don't know, is that what your experience with it? Because I don't really have much experience with it.
It's designed for people who want to play solo games and show off how fancy they are and how special their characters are, and not really a party mentality where you have to have each other to succeed and to survive. 5e, each character can stand on their own because they can do everything themselves. So it is very much a Mary Sue aimed game. There's a reason that people hate Mary Sue movies, is because they're boring and they're terrible.
Right.
And the writing quality of the more recent adventures, they're not good. The only real solid 5e module that came out was Curse of Strahd, which was just a revamped, 30, almost 40-year-old module from the Hickmans. And it was so good, they just added the little extra pieces here and there. And that's the best they have to show, because like Descent into Avernus, that is the worst written thing I have ever read. It's a 5e campaign where it's supposed to be D&D in hell, and it was sold as Mad Max in the 9 Hells. And I was like, yes, this is going to be awesome. And I got the book, and half of it's about a city I don't give a shit about. And the Mad Max part is like maybe half a page at the back that you don't have to do anything with. And the adventure itself was just endless fetch quests. It's garbage, and I don't think the writing's getting any better. And I do do wonder who is the market they're going for here, because I don't know that a lot of guys are interested in this, but they're clearly trying to replace their traditional consumer base, because Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast will keep saying stuff like, we want white men out of the hobby. Yeah, and then they're making orcs Mexicans for some reasons. Like, that's less racist than when they thought they were black.
To me, that came across weird, because it was already bad enough that somebody over there had tried to make them a different race of people before that, and now suddenly they turn into a real world race of mixed people. It doesn't make any sense to me.
I got to look into the numbers of how many women and how many of these LGBTQ plus whatever people are playing the game, because I can't imagine there's enough of them to replace what you'll lose from your traditional white male audience, because that's what D&D started with. And to the best of my knowledge, that's what most of the gamer base was. I'm not saying no one else games. I'm saying that's where the majority of the market's at. How are they going to trade off the loss over here by designing products that are feminine and don't really appeal to dudes, versus what are they going to pick up over here, which SJWs, they don't buy your product. They don't play your games. Not enough of them. You're not going to survive, because when companies market towards woke people, they usually go broke. And it's the same thing in the video game industry these days, because you have these executives churning out product that they intentionally want to alienate their gaming base with. And I gotta wonder, what's wrong with these people?
I don't understand it. I guess it just boils down to which the audience is. I mean, if they think there's an audience for the other stuff, then I guess they can try it. But when I write something, I'm just trying to appeal to the way that I feel is the most fun way to play, or to write an adventure around those kind of stories. And I don't really think about it in terms of what political topic can I insert in here, or what real world race situation can I stick in. It's almost more like in a more allegorian way, like Star Trek or something, where you're not really putting in like real world races or things like that, but you're just, you know what I mean? I'm just trying to make a fun story and give a message. And most of my messages are really about the individual person. It's the villain usually has some flaw or some problem in life that a normal person identifies with, the way that they grew up, or the way that they became something else than what they were, or accomplished something. That's what I focus on, versus making it so specific to these.
And speaking of creators, well, industries creating stories that their audience generally doesn't want and reaping the consequences of it, Hollywood. Disney's lost all kinds of money by churning out products that people don't want, and they basically refuse to adapt. But I have seen a few studios here and there start to get a clue. Some studios didn't lose the clue. What's your take on the modern state of the film industry?
I grew up with the film industry of like the 80s, primarily 80s and 90s, some of the 70s, but it was mainly the 80s and 90s and 2000s. And once you start to get into the 2000s, suddenly I started to feel that things were changing, or somehow there wasn't the same kind of movies that were coming out that really spoke to me, or whatever you want to use that phrasing. So that's why after like the 2000s, I sort of started checking out in a way a little bit to these movies weren't coming out. They weren't memorable. They weren't like the 80s, where you had all these constant like blockbusters, or these movies resonated with people. They stopped resonating with people, I think, is what maybe happened to a certain extent. And then if you had independent cinema that maybe filled that gap, for whatever reasons at that point was possible. But primarily, so yeah, and plus with the theaters, like there's nobody going to theaters anymore because there's barely any movies coming out. My oldest brother works in film distribution. He's worked in the film business his whole life in that end, and running theaters and film distributing. And he says the same thing. They're all just not enough movies are coming out that are any good or at all, and the theaters are all closing down. And then on top of that, they're trying to appeal to certain markets maybe that just aren't big enough, as far as maybe that's the problem, is that those markets are just they're so niche that they're hoping that somehow the audience that's not for that primary market is going to somehow gravitate to them and become part of it or something. But it's just, I would just say, don't categorize people, you know what I mean, into these different things. Just make movies again that are movies that don't have to adhere to these things. But I don't know I don't know much about politics. I don't know much about that. But from what I've heard, I don't know if it's a conspiracy theory or not or whatever, but there was over the last, so often 10 years or more, there's this thing that the places that give out money to big businesses have some list now, checklist of these things you have to do, or they're not going to finance you anymore, or something like that.
ESG, yeah.
Is that what they're called?
Environmental social goals. Real? That's what turns corporations woke.
So is that real, or is that a conspiracy?
Yeah. That's 100% real, because there's a gentleman that runs BlackRock, one of the largest or I think the largest investment firms in the world. And Larry Fink, he's been pushing it and he talks about it publicly. But within the past year, he started backpedaling from pushing it because some states are pulling out their retirement funds from ESG related investment funds. So he's on the back heel now. And these movies aren't making money. These studios are in trouble. So the companies are feeling the pinch. He's getting political pushback. So now he's saying it never happened. No, 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 no. He spent years talking about this and pushing this, basically telling corporations, we'll give you money to make up for the sales you're going to lose if you push our stuff. And this is guaranteed money. And it's been poison. It's been 100% poison.
Okay, see, I didn't realize that there was that component to it, as far as that they were going to supplement or something.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. So there you go. This is part of the problem. Mm-hmm. Ultimately, the studios or creators just need to stop thinking in terms of this person or that person. Just make it for anybody that wants to be entertained. You know what I mean?
Just make a good movie. Because you can take the Lethal Weapon series 1 through 3, watch it today. You're going to be entertained.
Right.
It's going to be a dynamite movie.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So that's all they have to do is just stop trying to compartmentalize these people, which to me just seems like the opposite direction of, you know what I mean, where we've all come for the last 30, 40 years as far as that stuff's concerned. Now you're trying to categorize people suddenly, or when everything was all just people. I'm not a political person, but when I make a book, I'm just trying to make it for everybody the most entertaining, fun story that everybody would enjoy. And that's
Let's switch to a cheerier topic. Who's your favorite actor and why?
Okay, I guess we'll say maybe Al Pacino. Or I'd like to say somebody that's so different all the time in their roles, that can be so different. Like maybe like Gary Oldman or like Al Pacino. But yeah, definitely, because a lot of times like Gary Oldman, they can look so different. You know what I mean? They perform this different character, which is the best, I think, for me.
Gotcha. And who is your favorite director besides yourself?
Oh, my favorite director, I would say, would be Brian De Palma. And then after that, we'll go say Scorsese. And then maybe after that, we'll say like a Tarantino. Or a lot of my favorite films were De Palma films because it's his style and presentation. So if I were to make a film, a serious film, not just a fun grindhouse kind of exploitation thing, where I was actually trying to make a point of something, I think that my style would be more the De Palma-ish style of. You can't quite tell that from my commercials, but they're just kind of fun stuff.
It's a different intent.
When I have a serious topic and a serious script, I think that my style would be more towards that. So, yeah, my favorite would be like
And you teased us earlier saying if you got to make a feature film, you had an idea what it would be. So it would be in a style of Brian De Palma. What would it be about?
What I'm talking about making a feature film right now, the most immediate thing would be more of just sort of an exploitation type of fun grindhouse style concept versus a more artsy, you know what I mean? Let me show you how clever I wrote this script. Because that's the way a lot of times people fall into play. Me and my friends that we've made films together, or projects together in the past, where we kind of have that, all of us. You know what I mean? Like, well, no, this script is special. We got to have $250,000 for this one, or $1 million for this one. I can't do it. Like, even myself, I can't do this one because I've got all these super complex scenes that just have to be in there, damn it. So, but my point is so, yes, if I was making that film, then I would do it more like a De Palma, very serious, more stylistic thing. But the current thing I'm talking about would be more of like a simple grindhouse style action schlock thing, like a hobo with a shotgun type of concept. You know what I'm talking about?
Love that
something
movie.
Like that. Yeah, so something like that, maybe just something that's fun, because I keep working on a lot of these films. And I've always wanted to make the film. Like I said, I had the equipment. I bought the equipment and everything. But we never got to the point where we could make one, just because most of the time we were making scripts that were just kind of too complex to shoot. Even in our heads telling us, no, this is simple to shoot. A lot of times they were still too complex. Yeah, so what I'm thinking is some kind of like a hobo with a shotgun kind of concept. I was a 90-minute grindhouse type action slot without worrying about too much like, no, this has to be exactly perfect.
Right up my alley. That might be my favorite genre is exploitation flicks. It really is.
Okay. Yeah, definitely something like that.
I knew I liked you for many reasons, and this is a strong commonality we share.
Well, you know, too, with that, why also I like doing, even though they haven't been as successful with the post-apocalyptic modules, because with those, now I can steer towards more modern day kind of stories, you know what I mean, between the that world, you know, because now suddenly you can have motorcycle gangs and all kinds of schlocky exploitation stuff with the Gamma world setting, you know what I mean, the post-apocalyptic stuff. So, and I'm still
Gotcha.
going to be working on more of those modules, but basically, so yeah, as far as films are concerned, that's kind of like what I'm like. What I'd like to do is the whole point of it is to see. Here's the problem with let's make the movie. First of all, let's make a movie. A lot of people want to spend like 150,000. They think it's some crazy number that has to be made, and then you're never going to make that money back. Especially not in today's times where studios don't want to buy anything, and streaming is what makes money. So my theory is try to make, and I've worked on a lot of these films now over the last few years where the guys did it for 30 grand, 20 grand, 10 grand. So with modern technology, like I said, with even a simple gimbal and a cell phone camera with lenses, you can suddenly now do all the same camera things you need to do with a big production. So what I'm thinking is put out an Indiegogo for a feature film and maybe ask like 15 grand or something like that, some kind of number. And then hope that the backers that like my books maybe want to invest in the film thing, and then they'll get a copy of it, and they would get their name and their credits or something like special thing, things like that. So that would basically be the kind of concept. I'm technically thinking about this for maybe in 2025, maybe. I've already got a friend of mine that owns a lot of commercial property, and he's more than over the moon, he said, to let me use any of the buildings. And there's a lot of places, like there's a shop, there's an apartment that can be used, there's a big warehouse setting with all kinds of weird machinery that like the serial killer could be working on or something, you know what I mean? Serial killer with the half face mask.
All right. So we're down to the last three questions. One, what's your favorite movie and why?
I would say Phantom of the Paradise. If you want to go with weird, if you want to go with mainstream favorite movie,
whatever your favorite movie is,
we're going to say Raiders of the Lost Ark. But if you want to go with more of a second choice, that would be, well, actually, we'll just go with three: Raiders of the Lost Ark, Reservoir Dogs, Phantom of the Paradise, something like that. Phantom of the Paradise being that artistic, that weird De Palma style. Reservoir Dogs being, I like the way that the writing was written, where
they
kind of play where it's all. Raiders being the traditional Spielbergian type action movie. So
since you brought up Brian De Palma, each year I've run with a theme of I'm going to watch a bunch of Mel Gibson movies or John Woo and Hong Kong movies or Terry Gilliam movies, and I need to do a De Palma year so I can get into that.
Definitely some on that list to think about would be like Blowout, Dress to Kill, Phantom of the Paradise, all those ones. Scarface, if you haven't seen in a while.
Of course.
Yeah, but all of those ones are very. He's also very much like a Hitchcockian style as well. De Palma's style is like. But yeah, De Palma would be good. Carrie, he did Carrie.
Oh, he did that?
Oh yeah.
Oh, didn't know that. See, this is why I pick themes to deepen my knowledge of cinema history, because there's so much out there and there's so much good stuff out there. You just got to have the time to watch it and to enrich your mind palace with it.
Right. And also with De Palma too, like Phantom of the Paradise, one of the earlier films, a lot of the shots and angles and things like that you start to see him do later on also in like Scarface and other movies. Because these certain thematics of his style of filmmaking in that early film where suddenly you can start to see it in other projects later on. But yeah.
So the second to last question. If you got kicked out of this reality and into the world of a specific movie or literary genre, where would you choose to be exiled to and why? Now, you don't get to come back, and you have to live with the good parts and the bad parts of the setting. And you're you. You're not like He-Man all of a sudden. You're not a string bean. You're Mark Taormino.
Okay, so you get kicked out of and to go back to any time period?
Anything. Any world, fantasy, reality, a movie, a book, whatever. A concept album.
Right. Yeah, I would just say like a Lord of the Rings type of environment, fantasy environment, like classic Tolkien style environment or something. You could do your little farming work outside or your writing, whatever the hell you would do, and then sit down by the fire inside or outside, you know what I mean? Have your high bottom leaf and your animals or whatever, and live a fairly peaceful, idyllic life until the damn orcs come in.
The black orcs, not the Hispanic orcs either. Yeah.
Well, that's the thing. Nobody, when I grew up, none of us ever thought of orcs as anything other than green-skinned monsters or dark or drow being anything other than a fictional elf character. never once did that thought ever cross my mind or any of my friends' mind, even to this day, until I hear this nonsense where they said, oh, yeah, those are supposed to be this kind of a person. What? Yeah. They're trying to apply this weird things onto this fantasy world where they're not, those things were never connected. You're connecting dots where there's no dot.
Listen, like when your favorite hobby horse is being racist, you see racism everywhere.
Right,
you make things that aren't racist.
Yeah. I mean, we never saw that at all. I mean, and going forward, I'm actively also in my artwork. I'm once again working. I still have the fantasy style, but I am working to be more diverse with some of the characters those appearing in some of the adventures. I mean, and that's fine. I've been doing that back since Undercity. And well, if you want to count, but Star Spawn, it was meant to be like a funny thing, like the Grindhouse style with the Chocolate Thunder character. But in Undercity, there's Asian characters in the artwork, and different Hispanic characters in the artwork on the back cover. I mean, I was already being inclusive with all that stuff back in the day, but I wasn't shoving it in your face. You know what I mean? I was just having it there. It's part of the storyline.
Your first major villain was a strong, independent woman.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, exactly. My first villain, yes, was a strong, independent woman.
Yeah. Good point. She didn't have no use for her husband. She just nailed him to a bed and left him there, you know?
That's right. Nailed him to the fucking bed, pardon my French, and left it there, then locked the other asshole into the gym.
Yep. So that's a very feminist character you put, front and center.
I just thought this is what the character is. But I didn't even think of her in those kind of terms.
And she got some of the best artwork I've ever seen anywhere. But I imagine their retort would be, oh, of course she's the bad guy, because these people aren't happy and you can't make them happy. But you made me very happy with that artwork, so don't worry.
Okay, yeah. And that was the intent too, was to get the best artist I could and to have that old-fashioned look. Every single thing of that picture, here's where they're going to come after me. They'll go, hey, we got that SOB. When you look at that picture of that vampire queen on that throne, everything but the bat head, I had dictated to him. I said, I want the succubus on the ground doing this and that with the wine. I want the outfits to be like this. They're like this. Everything's like this. The vampire queen is in this pose with the thing. Everything but the bat head. He came up with the bat head. So I was very specific with all of that stuff, with all the artwork, doing all the primary choosing and direction on all that. And then, like I said, then Alan would come in and do the cleanup work and choose on his projects which ones for the direction stuff. But the point is that all that stuff was very intentional. And it got caught flack, Facebook back then. I didn't realize I was coming in at the time when I guess this woke thing was kind of happening in the industry. It caught a little bit of flack, but not from the people that bought into it. It was just people on Facebook that said, oh, why is she wearing a bikini? Mm-hmm. And I go, well, why does Conan get to wear his bikini? And I'd post a picture of Conan in his bikini, right?
Uh-huh.
Then they'd be quiet suddenly. They would just disappear something.
Exactly. So
it caught some flack. I mean, even the Chocolate Thunder thing caught that blog guy, but that only caused people to go back to the project. Like there's some guy wrote a blog about Star Spawn and whether or not it was appropriate to have Chocolate Thunder there as a fictional character that's supposed to be a grindhouse concept. She's another heroic woman. She was the lead chief scientist on the ship, you know what I mean, and all the stuff she got done. And then everybody saw that guy's article, suddenly said, hey, there's nothing wrong with this. And then they all went back to project. 6 people came from that blog and back the book after the guy was trying to question the validity of whether or not that was something that was appropriate. Now, since then, that guy and I have worked out our things, whatever, were like this. But my point is that, sure, people are going to question things sometimes, I guess, especially when you're unknown.
Back to your choice of literary world. So that's a good one because the Shire seems like a place that inspires a lot of people because it's a fairly idyllic, comfortable setting and adventures over there if you want to go adventure. But if you don't want to adventure, you can hang out here and you'll be okay. So good choice. Now, that last question, the third and final question, is how do people get in touch with Mark Taormino? Where do they find you? Where do they get your stuff? Let's plug everywhere Mark Taormino's at.
Okay, thank you for that. Well, the main way to get to my books is through my website at www.darkwizardgames.com, and it has a security thing on there. It's HTTPS, so it's all secure for credit card transactions. And that's where you can pick up any one of my modules that's in stock. It'll tell you on there which ones are in stock. And then if you want to see any of my film project stuff or music videos or things like that, so you go to youtube.com/filmfanmark, and it should come up because I got that YouTube account way back in like 2006 when you could choose your name when you started. So that should be the way that they get with that. And then on Facebook, you can find me on Facebook as well.
Oh, and there's a Dark Wizard Games channel on YouTube as well.
That's right. There is a Dark Wizard Games channel on YouTube. Now, one thing real quick with respect to that, I still want to do something more with that than just product demos, but I don't think I'm qualified to do actual reviews, real reviews like you guys do, like you do and Captain Courageous. I'm trying to think of some other ideas or videos that I can do with the old modules that aren't really reviews, but yet aren't really going to insult them or trash them, you know what I mean, or something like that. So if anybody has ideas, let me know for some kind of routine things that I could do on there once a week or whatever to put out.
I got you. But yeah, find him on Facebook. He's easy to get in touch with. He'll answer your instant messages, and he's always posting about upcoming products, Kickstarters, reminding folks of, hey, I did this thing. You might still like that. And then keeps his product catalog visible for folks. And he's a funny guy. I'd recommend reach out to him. And if you got any ideas, well, maybe he'll run with that on his Dark Wizard Games channel.
Sometimes people approach me for projects or ideas, and then and I'm always here also to help get them kind of on the pathway too if they want to make their own games, like give site, things like that, tips on how to connect with artists.
That's true. You have a ton of contacts with quality artists, and that was a problem I ran into when I was helping a friend edit a short story collection of theirs. We wanted to get human artists to do it, but we went through like 6 of them, and we were offering money. They just kept ghosting us left, right, and center. So he wound up doing some really good AI artwork on his own because none of the rest of you would take our money. So if I had known you better, you could have probably helped us find someone who really wanted to work, and we could have employed them.
Yeah, no, I understand. And believe me, that's happened to me too, where even at this stage of the game, I've approached new other artists that I've wanted to work with, and I'll approach them and then they'll say, okay, yeah, I'm interested. Okay, so what's your rate? Okay, let me get that to you. And then I don't hear from them. Then I follow up with them like a couple months later. Hey, I'm just following up. Oh yeah, sorry about that. Let me get you that thing. And then I don't hear from them. So I don't know what's going on with some of those situations, but I know all my regular artists, that you'll see regular artists through my processes, and that's because they want to continue to work, and I have plenty of work for them. It's just that I'd like to work with new artists. Like I said, I've tried, but like you had, they just don't respond sometimes, and I just don't get it. The potential, a lot of work available, and they just don't want to.
If you're a graphic artist or a home repair, any trade, and you can schedule people and keep to that schedule, you will conquer the world because people will be able to throw their money at you. But if you do this unprofessional management practice where you just kind of work whenever you want to and you respond to messages whenever you feel like doing it, don't be surprised if you don't achieve your full potential. Show up to do the work that you said you wanted to do. I'm not asking too much.
Right. Exactly. That's one of the things that they say that to be successful as an actor is showing up.
It's like 80% of success right there. Just show up.
Exactly.
All right. Well, I appreciate your time, Mark. It's been a lot of fun. So now people know where to get a hold of you. You spent more time with your dear friends, and I'll wish you a good rest of your day.
Okay. Thanks. You too. Have a good holiday.
Now, wasn't that interview packed with surprises? I mean, who would have guessed that a guy taking acting lessons from a Charles Bronson knockoff would go on to incorporate those acting lessons into an RPG module centering around delving through the layers of hell? Who would have seen coming that a guy who danced in a Speedo in a music video was also the same guy that made several Bible-themed computer games in the 90s? As you can see, there's a lot going on with Mark, and I thought it was a fascinating journey, and I like counting him as a friend. Were there any things that you found most interesting or surprising from Mark's life story? If so, please drop those in the comments. I'd love to see what angle you drew from his experiences. And if you enjoyed this interview, remember to like and subscribe and share it around, because this just proves that the people making the role-playing games that we enjoy so much, they are some weird but very interesting people. So my dear friends, that's what I got for now. And as we part, I wish you nothing but the best.